their personality, or make them actually think that they could be a superhero. So obviously we're going to take this in a bit of a different direction than the movie does. Based on the trailer, there's some pretty wild stuff that goes on when Mr. Krupp is hypnotized, and it looks an awful lot like some sort of magic business. Now, if I were a betting man, I would say that this is going to have some sort of massive impact on the movie's plot. Mostly, how come George's 3D hypno ring has been imbued with magic powers? So putting things like magic aside, let's take a look at how hypnosis actually works. Once we've got that sorted, maybe you'll agree with me on the conclusion that I've come to, which is that Mr. Krupp was probably more of a weirdo than we thought, even before he was Captain Underpants. As said before, hypnosis is a little different than what Hollywood would have us believe. You don't need a weird mustache or a pendulum in order to hypnotize someone. Although, a tangible focal point, like a pendulum for the subject, certainly helps. In fact, it's actually a lot easier to be hypnotized than these works would have you think. Moreover, it's incredibly likely that you've actually been hypnotized before without even knowing it. As for who hypnotized you, it was probably yourself, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We've mentioned a few times already the application of stage hypnosis, but hypnosis also has roots in far more avenues than just entertainment. It actually has a basis in a surprisingly wide variety of medical fields. It also has a long and storied history as a therapeutic tool, the practice of which is of course called hypnotherapy. So this isn't all just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Can we bring mumbo jumbo back? I really like that term. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's important to note that hypnosis has a lot less to do with mind control and a lot more to do with suggestion and susceptibility. Being actively hypnotized requires investment from the hypnotizee to work with the person doing the hypnotizing. In short, when being hypnotized by another person, the one falling into a trance has to want to fall into a trance. Believe it or not, it's remarkably easy to maintain control of your conscious mind. You're doing it right now. It's so easy, you didn't even know you were doing it. Venturing back to the world of stage hypnosis, if you've ever seen an act like this, you might notice that the performer will usually grab a whole bunch of people from the audience, and then while they're in the process of putting everyone into their trance, they might start to send people back into the crowd. This is either because the entertainer just doesn't think that that person's going to provide the amount of entertainment that they want, or because the person on stage just wasn't in the right headspace and wasn't opening themselves up to the performer's suggestions. And because this is a necessary component in active hypnosis, some people just can't really be willfully hypnotized. To relate this back to Captain Underpants, Mr. Krupp was very clearly able to be hypnotized. After all, it's a major plot element. So this would mean that at the time George threatens to hypnotize Krupp, Krupp doesn't really see it as a threat and then actually willfully opens himself up to being hypnotized by George. Now, why he would do this, I have no idea. Maybe he just didn't believe George and wanted to prove him wrong. Maybe he just wanted to laugh at George's expense. But since he actually did fall under a trance, we know that Krupp was complacent in his transformation to Captain Underpants. As for the actual state of hypnosis itself, there's been a ton of debate about its true nature over the years. But there's no denying that hypnosis is a real observable thing. But because it's about our own brain, there are obviously a lot of unanswered questions about it. However, some lines of thinking about hypnosis have become more accepted than others over the years. One of the most widely accepted explanations of hypnosis is that you're entering a state of intense relaxation. And rather than completely surrendering your self-awareness, you actually enter a heightened state of awareness and concentration, paying less attention to the stuff in your peripherals. But the trick is that through the relaxation techniques you're put through beforehand, it's not the conscious mind that's entering this state of concentration. Rather, it's your subconscious. What's the difference? Well, if you're watching this video right now and processing everything I'm telling you, that's your conscious mind at work. It's analytical. It's your internal monologue. It's what takes in and interprets all of the stimuli that you encounter in your day-to-day life. Your subconscious is the one that's doing all of the processing behind the scenes and also keeping your body, running. Things like your heartbeat, your blinking, your breathing, all that good stuff that I just reminded your conscious mind about. You're welcome. The subconscious is also the part of the mind that holds things like memories. And one of the most widely accepted explanations of hypnosis is that it's bringing the subconscious to the forefront since it's much more susceptible to suggestion. And that might still sound to you like some spooky mind control stuff, but let me ask you something. Have you ever been doing a menial task or playing a video game and then gotten this feeling where your vision blurs and you feel like you've stopped paying attention to what you're doing? To you, there's no longer anything in your hands and everything you're doing just sort of blends together and you just simply are? That feeling, believe it or not, is actually the result of you putting yourself under a small hypnotic trance. I mean, think about it. If you're, say, playing a game and then you enter this state, most people will actually end up playing a lot better than if they were consciously thinking about it. If you had actually stopped paying attention to what you were doing, wouldn't you start to suck at it? In this state of heightened attention, your subconscious mind takes over, as what you're doing has probably become second nature, like muscle memory for the brain. But here's the thing with the subconscious mind. It might be more open and susceptible to suggestion, but it isn't stupid. Above all else, the subconscious mind is always looking out for number one. After all, it's still you in control, and you can only be as hypnotized as you want to be. Even if you're under a hypnotic trance, the mind isn't going to put you in any danger or make you do something that compromises your morals. This is why in practices like hypnotherapy, anecdotal evidence has shown that while hypnosis can be useful in helping to do positive things like quitting smoking, there's far less evidence to support someone being hypnotized into believing something dangerous, like believing that they're a world-class hitman, or a superhero for that matter. But basically, while the hypnotic trance does lower your inhibitions, the subconscious won't force you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. You know, like something that would put itself in just as much danger as you. Self-preservation, it's a pretty important thing. Now right now, I'm going to use my actual mind-reading powers and tell you what you're thinking. What about in the case of stage hypnosis where the subject is made to, I don't know, act like a variety of barn animals? Well, you could just assume that most people are weird, because we are, but there's actually a more sensible theory. And this is that the subconscious mind, despite what I just said, is sort of pressured into it. Now, this probably wouldn't work on somebody who wouldn't already act silly in front of an audience, but the subconscious combines things like the societal pressure of you being on a stage, along with the willingness to be hypnotized, and it comes to the conclusion that you should just play along with the performer because that's how it's supposed to go, right? It's almost like there's a placebo effect mixed in with all of this as well. Though that pressure to play along would probably cease if the performer was like, okay, that's enough pretending to be a cow. Okay, next, I want you to go murder that guy over there. Okay, so what does any of this have to do with Mr. Krupp and Captain Underpants? Well, it raises a lot of questions about Krupp. Firstly, we already know that he was more than open to being hypnotized by George. But based on the results of that hypnosis, again, magic aside, it's a very interesting result that gives us some insight into Mr. Krupp's mind. First of all, we can infer that Krupp already has an extensive knowledge of who Captain Underpants is. While he's definitely seen the hero on the cover of George and Harold's comic, it's unclear if he's actually read it. That is, until he transforms and uses Captain Underpants' trademark war cry. Tra-la-la! I never understood how to say that as a kid, and now that the trailers come out, I still don't understand. Anyway, when it comes to hypnosis, while the subconscious is incredibly susceptible to creating false memories given the right stimulus, it can't just give you accurate information that you were unaware of. Being hypnotized doesn't make you Neo from the Matrix, just able to learn Kung Fu with the snap of your fingers. So if Mr. Krupp, while under this hypnotic suggestion, knew specific details about Captain Underpants, it would suggest that he's read it before. And this actually makes sense, since in the book, George and Harold were distributing copies of their comic to everyone. So the principal was probably able to get his hands on one as well. But if he's acting like Captain Underpants while under this trance, that means that not only has Krupp read Captain Underpants, but he's also thought, at least on a subconscious level, that he wants to be Captain Underpants. Not only that, but also that fighting crime despite having no superpowers is also a safe and reasonable decision to make. With all of this in mind, it makes you wonder how Krupp's subconscious is able to handle anything when he's not under a trance. I mean, the subconscious is definitely unreliable when it comes to analytical thinking, and it does make mistakes, but this is like a whole other level, dude. And it's not like he's in front of an audience, so he's not being pressured to entertain. This is the pure, unfiltered Mr. Krupp. Could it be that Captain Underpants is actually the story of a man so broken and dead inside that he unwittingly uses the opportunity of being hypnotized to cut loose and be the person he's always wanted to be? I honestly can't tell if that would make the movie more uplifting or sadder. So after looking more closely at the concept of hypnosis, can we say it's possible for someone to have a sudden change of heart through the practice? Well, no, not particularly. But because of this, it has brought us to some eye-opening conclusions about the mean-spirited, child-hating Mr. Krupp. So all in all, on the plausibility meter, I'm going to rate the idea that you can fundamentally change someone's personality through hypnosis 0 underpants out of 5. But I'm also going to rate the plausibility of Mr. Krupp being a complete incompetent weirdo even before he was Captain Underpants 5 underpants out of 5. But what do you think? Have you ever been hypnotized before, whether it was in therapy, as part of a show, or just by yourself? What was the experience like? Are you excited for the Captain Underpants film? Myself, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I'm just hoping that the movie can live up to its gorgeous animation. Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments, and also be sure to let us know any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in the future. Until then, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Channel Frederator if this is your first time here, and don't forget to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button to become part of our notification squad. And once you've done all of that, remember, Frederator loves you.
Disney's Hercules premiered in 1997 and was ultimately praised for its charming witticisms and colorful characters. However, one can't help but wonder about the real story behind Hercules, the telling of one man's quest to achieve glory, but the cost of which is gritty, tragic, and overloaded with monsters. Oh, and did I mention murder? Yeah, there's plenty of that too. Hi, my name is Frank with Channel Frederator, and we'll be checking out just that in today's Disney's Dark Secrets, the truth behind Hercules. But first, a brief disclaimer. Since the tale of Hercules is but a myth, there's no definitive version of the story, and some details may vary, though only slightly. The overall story always remains the same: dark. A demigod is born. As implied, many key details of Hercules' mythology were changed to better suit Disney's G-rated audience. Hercules is not the son of Zeus and Hera, as explained in the Disney movie, but rather the son of Zeus and Alchemy, the woman we actually see raise him in the 1997 film. As it turns out, Hercules is a demigod for one simple reason: a one-night stand. Zeus is well known throughout the heavens and earth for his many infidelities, and as a result, he's fathered hundreds of illegitimate children. That's right, hundreds. He gets around. To make matters worse, Alchemy is unaware at the time that it's the great god she is with, because Zeus is disguised as her husband, Amphitryon. So you can imagine her confusion the next day when the real Amphitryon returns home from war. Right off the bat, it's pretty obvious why Disney reworked this part of the myth, and simply made Hercules the son of Zeus and Hera, had him kidnapped by Pain and Panic, abandoned, and found later by his adopted parents. But because of Zeus's infidelity is such a crucial component to the original story, several other aspects had to be changed for their version to make sense. Characters were removed, revised, replaced, or added, as in the case of the Muses, Pain and Panic, Pegasus, and many more. In fact, Pegasus actually belonged to Perseus, not Hercules. He was also born of Gorgon blood, and not of the clouds. Anyway, in regards to his upbringing, Amphitryon isn't just the stepdad of Hercules, but he's the king of Thebes. Therefore, Hercules is actually from Thebes, and not Mount Olympus. He also has a half-brother named Iphicles that we never see in the film. Iphicles is born just seconds before Hercules in a double pregnancy, which can really happen, as crazy as that may sound. Since Iphicles is the actual son of Amphitryon, it is clear that Hercules belongs to the gods, and that makes Alchemy afraid for her life. Why, you ask? Because Zeus is married to one crazy bitch, Hera and the High King. Hera is the wife of Zeus in both versions of the story, but Disney chose to portray her as loving instead of showing off her true nature. They also left out the part where she's Zeus's sister? What? I know! Anyway, Hera is an extremely jealous wife, which doesn't pair well with her husband's lifestyle. If she catches wind that a child is born by Zeus, then she seeks out to destroy that mother and child at any cost. Needless to say, she frickin' hates Hercules from the start. So Hera forms a diabolical plan to eliminate Hercules from her life. That's right, Hera is the bad guy, not Hades, as depicted in the film. It's Mommy Dearest. No wire hangers! You know, from that movie. Anyway. Now, as a descendant of the great warrior Perseus, Hercules is next in line to rule as High King over Mycenae. This meant that he would soon rule over two kingdoms that dominated modern-day Greece. Of course, Zeus is caught gloating about it, and so Hera sets out to prevent Hercules from coming into power. She deviously convinces the goddess of birth to deliver another descendant of Perseus, 2 months premature, the cousin Eurystheus. At the time, the goddess tries to prevent the birth of Hercules for as long as possible, but is quickly outsmarted by the servants. Unfortunately, Eurystheus is born first and becomes High King. He eventually joins up with Hera to become the bane of his cousin's existence for an entire decade. This period is known as the 12 Labors of Hercules, and it serves as the central point in Disney's Hercules, to an extent anyway. Hercules versus Heracles. It's important to note that Hercules isn't the hero's real name. It's Heracles. Hercules is actually the Roman version of the name. Ironically, Disney chose the Roman name, most commonly used in the US, but kept the other names as their Greek versions. What's even more confusing is that Heracles wasn't the original name of the mythology either. Our hero is born Alcides before he earns the name Heracles at 8 months old, which ironically means glory of Hera. Anyway, in Disney's Hercules, we see a baby get attacked by Hades' henchmen, Pain and Panic, in the form of 2 deadly snakes. Without hesitation, the child ties the 2 in a knot and plays with them. According to the myth, this actually happened, but the snakes were sent by Hera, not Hades. It was a test to see whether or not the child really was a descendant of Zeus. Obviously, there was no devilish henchman involved in the original story, but the child's ability to overcome these snakes proved that he cannot be vanquished so easily. So, Hera starts biding her time and building an army of monsters that she hopes will one day destroy Hercules. Yep, Hera truly is the OG of evil stepmoms. Meg and the inciting incident. Disney paints a portrait of Hercules feeling excluded from society because of his freakish strength, but it is actually quite the contrary for our young hero in the original tale. Hercules has no problem with being socially accepted. In fact, he's so popular that he fathers 50 children by the time he's 20. No doubt following in his father's footsteps. Although it's unclear if Hercules knows Zeus is his father during his youth, or when he discovers this information. We do know that he's aware of his supernatural strength at a young age, and since demigods are pretty common in Greek mythology, his powers came as no surprise to anyone in the city. In fact, they're what made Hercules so popular in the first place. So, if fitting in wasn't the problem, then what was? Well, originally Hercules marries a princess named Megara. Sound familiar? His love interest in the movie named Meg. Hercules and Megara have 2 children and live a happy life together, which in turn makes Hera very angry. One night while relaxing at home with his family, Hercules blacks out, and when he wakes up, he discovers the blood of his wife and children. As horrifying as that may seem, that's it for Meg in the original story of Hercules. She's barely present at all. Afterwards, Hercules exiles himself from the city of Thebes and travels to find the Delphic Oracle so that he may require about a penance for this horrible crime. The Oracle tells Hercules that all will be forgiven if he serves the High King, and as an added bonus, he'll be granted immortality. So his goal was never to become immortal and join the gods, but to seek out atonement for the murder of his loved ones. It's pretty deep, and maybe too dark for a children's audience. So we see why they made its goal to find where he fits in. Something closer to what all kids face, and frankly, all adults too, rather than to seek vengeance for his family's death. Zero to hero. Let's talk about the trials of becoming a hero in regards to the myth. Once Hera hears that Hercules seeks out atonement, she visits Eurystheus with instructions explaining what to do upon his arrival. Since the snake incident, Hera has prepared 10 trials for Hercules, with claims that he will be dead after the first. These trials mostly consist of the monsters for the very occasion. Quick side note, this part of the story is referred to as the 12 labors of Hercules, because 2 trials were ultimately discredited and thus 2 more were added. It's a real pain. The first trial is the Nemean lion with the pelt of steel. Not literally, but the pelt is so strong it's impenetrable. After a rough 12 days of hunting, Hercules eventually chokes out the lion, skins it, and wears its pelt as armor. In fact, Disney hid an Easter egg in the film to pay homage to this part of the story by showing Hercules briefly wearing the pelt of Scar from The Lion King. The second trial is the deadly Hydra, and Disney manages to capture the events of this battle pretty closely, with the exception of a few details. For instance, Hera is the one watching over the fight, not Hades. Also, the most difficult aspect of the fight is left out of the film. Hercules has to hold his breath the entire time because the Hydra is just that poisonous. When the creature dies, Hercules dips his arrows in the blood and takes the poisonous arrows along for the rest of the journey. These arrows end up becoming a pretty iconic weapon in the old lore. There is also the aid of his nephew, Iolaus, the son of his half-brother Iphicles, as well as the aid of Athena, who gifted Hercules a sword just moments before the battle. Oddly enough, it's worth mentioning that Athena, in a way, plays the role that Zeus did in the film. As a concerned guardian, Athena watched and rooted for Hercules since the day he was born. Not to mention, she's the goddess of war, so that's gotta be the coolest sister ever. Hades and the Fates. Hades is Lord of the Underworld in the original tale, though he's no fast-talking businessman voiced by James Woods. He's not exactly spiteful over his position either. Unlike his Disney counterpart, Hades accepts that this position is the job that must be done. Hades makes an appearance in the original story of Hercules, but it's a pretty minor role in comparison to the film. We won't list every trial in the story, but let's take a look at the last one. As the final trial of the 12 labors of Hercules, the hero travels to the underworld to conquer the 3-headed hellhound, Cerberus. Hades. Of course, Hades intervenes and places a few stipulations in order, like no weapons allowed. Nonetheless, Hercules faces off against the Hellhound and eventually finds and delivers the dog right to the doorstep of his cousin, King Eurystheus. As for the Fates, well, they are characters in Greek mythology, but like the Muses, they aren't involved in the story of Hercules, although it's worth mentioning that Disney depicted the sisters correctly as three ugly old hags, each with their own set of duties in dictating the life expectancy of mortals. The sharing of the eyeball wasn't exactly their thing, though as seen in the film. Strangely enough, that served as an ode to the sisters of the Gorgons, who share an eye, a tooth, and were born permanently old. Yikes! Phil and Nessus. In regards to the myth, Phil and Nessus are minor roles that have big impacts on the outcome of the story. Neither of these figures are really seen until many years after the events of the film take place, towards the end of Hercules' life, but they do help bridge gaps in the Disney story. Prime example, Amphitryon was the actual person responsible for training Hercules in battle, but Phil was just a footnote during the last years. Phil, or Philoctetes, wasn't a legendary trainer of heroes, nor was he even a satyr. He was just one man brave enough to set the funeral pyre aflame for the legendary Hercules. This was by request because, spoiler alert, Hercules had to die before he could ascend to Mount Olympus. That's where Nessus comes in, the centaur who is reduced to one scene in the film. Remember when we see Meg? As previously stated, this didn't happen until much later in the timeline, and it was Hercules' second wife, Deianira, who was captured. Hercules uses one of his poisonous arrows he got back after his Hydra fight to end Nessius, but the centaur has one final trick up his sleeve. Nessius gives his bloody cloak to Deianira, claiming it will work as a powerful love spell worthy of making Hercules forever faithful to her. Deianira is none the wiser when she eventually throws the bloody cloak upon her husband, and eventually sends him to his death. Nessius, that clever bastard, knew the Hydra poison was in his blood, and that said poison-infused blood, or something covered in it, would kill Hercules should it be placed upon his flesh.
Dit Hercules has 50 kids.
Hoe ziet je werkdag als luchtverkeersleider?
Most people consider the 90s to be the golden age of animated television because it introduced countless shows that were revolutionary for the time, many of which became cultural icons for the modern era. Think about where we'd be today without shows like The Simpsons, South Park, or SpongeBob SquarePants and the early Nicktoons. There's a reason why these shows are still relevant today, and are used as examples for current creators to make our favorite tunes so awesome. They had amazing relatable characters, which is a huge part of effective storytelling. If we like the characters involved, then we'll invest in their stories. Pretty straightforward, right? That being said, it's no easy task for a kid's cartoon to engage a general audience, especially when it comes to the antagonist. Usually, a bad guy in a kid's cartoon is either a one-dimensional supervillain or a small-scale bully. However, the golden age of cartoons broke through these boundaries by saying, sure, it's easy to love the good guy, but we'll make you love the bad guy too. And that's why many of these shows are still ongoing, have reboots, or helped inspire the new original cartoons of today. These shows create a love-hate relationship between the viewer and the antagonist, which just so happens to be our topic of interest here at Channel Frederator. I'm JD, and today we're counting 10 cartoon characters you loved to hate as a kid. Let's get started. Number 10. Team Rocket from Pokemon. Prepare for trouble and make it double, because Team Rocket is blasting off at the speed of light and landing right at our number 10 spot. Satoshi Tajiri introduced the world to Pokemon in 1996, and aside from Ash and our favorite little critters, there were some pretty quirky villains. So quirky and memorable that I bet you still know their motto.
Surrender now or prepare to fight.
Meow, that's right.
Jesse, James, and Meowth aren't exactly masterminds when it comes to the life of crime. I mean, they say they're out for world domination, but their misadventures usually land them as the comic relief of the series. At least it did in the first generation. While Team Rocket often seemed like one-trick ponies, their characters eventually grew on you like a weird, unwanted fungus, which might explain why they're still mainstays on the show now that Ash and his gang are gone. Truth is, Pokemon just wouldn't be the same without Team Rocket. After all, the entire Rocket organization has evolved into a huge part of the Pokemon mythos, and trust me when I say there's a lot more that meets the eye when it comes to Jesse, James, and Meowth. For instance, we all know the Rocket duos are named after famous cowboy criminals, but did you know that the Japanese versions are named after warlords instead? Yep, and ironically, Meowth is based on the Japanese symbol of good luck. Another interesting tidbit is that James has a serious cross-dressing affinity that actually got an episode banned from US release. Oh, and Jessie is the dominant character because she's based on the head writer's abusive ex-girlfriend. I mean, these guys are quite the characters, and to make matters worse, they actually get married in the manga storyline. Number 9, Angelica Pickles from Rugrats. On August 11th, 1991, something amazing happened. The Nicktoon was born. Nickelodeon debuted 3 original Nicktoons, the second of which was none other than Rugrats by Klasky and Scoopo. Audiences were charmed by the day-to-day lives of a couple of toddlers who viewed the ordinary world through their imaginations. But the realest character on the show was none other than the all-too-familiar antagonist, Angelica Pickles. The only 3-year-old you ever wanted to kick. Well, think about kicking anyway. Angelica's character was truly genius. True, the other babies were endearing enough, but because most of us dealt with bossy older relatives during childhood, this character was enough to make you cringe. She was the absolute pinnacle of princess, the worst of the worst, and she tortured the younger kids just for fun. Ooh, I'm having some serious playground PTSD right now. Still, as much as we hated Angelica, there were times that we really felt bad for her. After all, she was a complex individual with no one by her side but her doll Cynthia. Clearly, she was no one's hero. But for a 3-year-old, Angelica could really hold her own. I mean, you have to be pretty smart to manipulate both kids and adults to be doing your bidding, right? By the time she turned 30, she could have achieved supervillain status. Number 8, Sarah from Ed, Edd n Eddy. While the Nicktoons were making a splash, or splat I should say, Cartoon Network created their own original series of shows under the infamous Cartoons title that also dominated the 90s and early 2000s with shows like Ed, Edd n Eddy. No one could deny that this show had its charm, because it was hard not to laugh at these 3 harebrained kids and their endless shady pursuits to buy candy, specifically Jawbreakers. Needless to say, somehow their plans always went awry, and typically it was their own doing. Of course, Ed's little sister Sarah usually made things worse. Sarah was so detrimental for such a young age. Her loud, aggressive mouth served as her signature on the show, and it was so terrifying that even the older boys would cower. Although, you can't help but smile at the fact that such a little girl could be such a big antagonist, even more so than the neighborhood bully Kevin. So yeah, Sarah annoyed the heck out of all of us with her relentless, nasty attitude. But can you really blame her? Just imagine if Ed was your big brother. Number 7, Dee Dee from Dexter's Laboratory. Dexter's Laboratory was the first cartoon released on Cartoon Network in 1996. It was created by Genndy Tartakovsky and pitched to Fred Writer's own Fred Seibert for his What a Cartoon showcase at Hanna-Barbera. That same year, 3 pilot episodes were chosen to air on Cartoon Network, the success of which landed Dexter's Lab a series of its own. The irony of it all was that Dexter's Lab wasn't inspired by Dexter, it was inspired by Dee Dee. The entire idea stemmed from a drawing of a tall, thin ballerina that Genndy decided to pair with a short, blocky counterpart for contrast, the character which eventually evolved into Dexter. The two were certainly an odd couple. Dexter fell into his respective role as the boy genius with a hidden lab, and Dee Dee evolved into the meddling older sister, a pain that some of us know all too well. Dee Dee made for a completely convincing character because her reckless behavior really made you want to shake your fist. In fact, the true beauty behind this character was her overwhelmingly girlish innocence towards every single situation, no matter how chaotic. It kind of made it hard to truly hate her because Dee Dee wasn't vindictive towards Dexter. She was just hyperactive and completely aloof in a very, very destructive way. Number 6, Helga Pataki from Hey Arnold. Another quintessential slice-of-life cartoon was Hey Arnold, created by Craig Bartlett in 1996. The show was loosely based on the friends and family in Craig's life and centered around a kind-hearted 4th grader living in the inner city with his grandparents. Now, I'm pretty sure the success was mostly attributed to the character development. They were all very authentic archetypes, even similar to my own group of friends at the time. Of course, the one that stood out the most by far was Helga G. Pataki. That was one tough broad that broke through all the stereotypes.
You're right, Rhonda. I'm not like the rest of you. I'm not wearing a mask.
The truth is, underneath that tough exterior was an insecure and talented young girl, and like most preteens out there, her feelings were often so complex that she didn't even understand them herself, which made her character possibly the most relatable on the show. Not to mention, her struggles were all too real. An unhealthy obsession, inattentive parents, a highly successful sister that constantly overshadows her. Honestly, I get why she was so angry, but I have no clue why Arnold had to suffer. Love is just a funny thing, I guess. Number 5, Roger Klotz from Doug. Our number 5 spot goes to the first Nicktoon ever. That's right, Doug premiered alongside Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy that fateful day, and continued to have a 4-season run from 91 to 94 before Disney acquired the rights and revamped the show for their network. Doug was created by Jim Jenkins, who based the entire plot and many of the characters off his own life. So that must mean that the real Roger Klotz is out there somewhere. The iconic bully loved to humiliate Doug since day one in Bluffington, and for no real reason other than the sake of being a total D-bag. However, despite the crude behavior, we all love Roger because he's more of an obnoxious friend than a true foe. He wasn't a violent person, but more so a prankster that really loved to laugh at the expense of others. Ugh, and that laugh. It was almost as haunting as Woody Woodpecker or Nelson Muntz from The Simpsons. Actually, Roger is a lot like the character of Nelson, in that his attitude was a product of his dysfunctional upbringing. Roger was raised by a quirky single mother with a low income, trailer park. He managed to attract a group of followers, but Roger was a lone wolf by nature, a one-man wolf pack. While his morals were loose, Roger stood his ground when the time was right. And occasionally that meant standing up for Doug too, even if he made him pay for it later. Number 4, Dib Membrane from Invader Zim. 2001 brought us a sci-fi cult classic of epic proportions, a show almost too weird for general audiences, but somehow landed itself on a kids network because it was just that awesome. Invader Zim stems from the twisted mind of veteran comic book artist Jonan Vasquez, the genius that graced the comic book world with Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and Squee the spin-off series. Any previous fan of Jonan's can definitely sense his stink all over the Nickelodeon cult classic, and that's just Zim speak for influence or artistic style. The show took a refreshing spin on things by making the alien, Zim, our main focus, which made big-headed Dib the human antagonist.
Why is his head so big? Why is his head so big?
While it's not too often that we root against the human race, Dib somehow made it happen. He's just so annoyingly in your face and was persistent about it too. He became so obsessive in his pursuit to uncover Zim's diabolical schemes that you just couldn't help but laugh when his plans backfired. I mean, you know it's bad when an exiled alien is more likable in comparison. After 3 seasons of failure on Dib's behalf, it's really no wonder why Professor Memrid referred to him as his poor, insane son. Still, Dib was just one kid fighting for the world, and that's a pretty thankless job. He seemed like the only person on the entire planet with any common sense, outside of his family, but they were far too self-involved to see that Zim was a friggin' alien, which, by the way, wasn't that hard to figure out. I mean, no ears, nose, and he has green skin? Come on, people! So sure, Dib was awkward and annoying, but he was the only person that cared enough to try and save our Mother Earth. Thanks to him, our world was always safe from the Urkin Empire, at least for another day or so. Number 3, Bill Cipher from Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls premiered on the Disney Channel in June of 2012, and by the 5th episode, the tune had already attracted millions of viewers and an eager fan base. The quirky, offbeat series followed the paranormal adventures of twins Dipper and Mabel Pine, alongside their great uncle, or Grunkle Stan, in the fictitious backwoods town of, you guessed it, Gravity Falls. Although the show was short-lived, it managed to produce a plethora of lovable, recurring characters. Of those, a popular, rather interesting fan favorite was the isosceles monster, Bill Cipher. Bill is how you'd imagine the devil, but a lot more triangular. He's manipulative and cunning, always preying upon the desperate and looking to make a deal, but usually to his own benefit. Admittedly, he may not look like much of a threat, but he's capable of ripping your teeth out with just a flick of the wrist, and that sounds like one heck of a threat to me. As a master of the mind, or brain demon, so to speak, Bill is charming and to a very dangerous degree. It's obvious he can't be trusted, but he's so convincing that people will still hear him out. Kinda like a really good car salesman. He's also got a wicked sense of style. That might not be the most important detail, but it's totally worth noting. Anyway, Bill never let us down as the main antagonist of Gravity Falls. We never knew what to expect from him, when he'd show up, or what he was secretly planning. It played into the whole mystery of the show and served as one of the main reasons we viewers kept coming back for more. Number 2, Aku from Samurai Jack. Dexter's Lab wasn't Genndy Tartakovsky's only contribution to Cartoon Network. In August of 2001, the animated phenomenon known as Samurai Jack hit the screen with massive positive reception, and the revival series premiered on Adult Swim in March of this year. As anyone who's seen the show will tell you, it's legendary for several reasons, and arguably one of the biggest reasons is Aku. You know, the Master of Masters, the Deliverer of Darkness, the Shogun of Sorrows. There's more, but you get the point. Aku is the ultimate in tyrannical villains, but he's more than that. He's pure evil. That you can't stop watching. We're talking about an ancient, shape-shifting, flaming-eyed demon whose screams can open wormholes in space and time. He's pillaged lands, he's enslaved people, and oh god, did I mention the crucified dogs? Pure evil! But oddly enough, his pure evil makes the show so good. Watching Jack face off against Aku always seems hopeless. Like watching Hulk Hogan fight the actual Hulk. You know it's gonna be bad, but you just can't look away. So, I guess we have to thank Aku. Come here, you evil monster, you. And number 1, the Joker from Batman the Animated Series. That's right, number 1 on our list was the all-time favorite, the Joker from 1992's Batman the Animated Series. And do we really need to explain ourselves here? The Joker is one of the most memorable, iconic, timeless, and beloved psychopaths in all pop culture. In fact, he's somehow more relevant now than when he first debuted on screen all the way back in 1966. The critically acclaimed animated series did justice to the franchise, as well as to the nefarious villain, and Mark Hamill ranks among the top portrayals of the Joker to date, often right behind Heath Ledger's notorious anarchist Joker from The Dark Knight. In fact, he still reprises the role occasionally. As an ode to the original animated series, Mark Hamill returned to the Batman Arkham video game series developed by Rocksteady alongside his co-stars Kevin Conroy and Arlene Sorkin. But why do we love the Joker so much? Well, for starters, he's been Batman's deadliest nemesis since the first comic book released in 1940, and that's not something that should be taken lightly considering there's a ton of villains in Gotham City. Still, none could hold a candle to the clown Prince of Crime, who finds joy in tormenting his victims psychologically before torturing them physically. Not to mention, as the master of manipulation, the Joker's mind games can make anyone go insane, and Harley Quinn is a prime example. As much as she's devoted her life to the Joker, she's always just another pawn in his evil plan to take over the city. The Joker is diabolical to say the very least. Why do you think his schemes almost always involve innocent bystanders? Otherwise, where's the fun? He definitely provides games for us to watch and solve, deadly as they may be. Good thing he's not real though. There you have it guys, I'm JD and thanks for watching 10 cartoon characters you loved to hate as a kid. Who's your favorite? Did we miss any characters? Comment below and let us know. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have videos dropping every week, so make sure to subscribe to Channel Frederator, your cartoon central on the internet. When you start to become obsessed with something, you start to revel in every possible way you can express your rampant fandom. Now, for most of us, that's buying a shirt or something. But imagine if you had your own show. You'd probably drop a lot of little nuts, right? Steven Universe is chock full of Easter eggs, alluding to some truly great pop culture phenomenons. Whether it be an appearance of Beedrills or an entire sequence taken from Cowboy Bebop, Steven Universe has offered up some super cool nods to keep their fans on their toes, and those in the know continually delighted. I'm JD at Channel Frederator, and today we've decided to showcase a few of our favorites. Some of these you may have caught, some of them maybe you haven't, but I guarantee they're all fun. Let's check them out. Regular show. In the episode Cat Fingers, Amethyst shapeshifts into a blue jay and throws out a strangely familiar one-liner. Chill it, dude. It feels like a none too subtle reference to Regular Show's spunky avian Mordecai. Furthermore, Kat Morris and Hilary Florido, who co-wrote the episode, previously worked on Regular Show, just in case there was any doubt about the intent of Amethyst's transformation. Gunter, stuffed animal. Who doesn't love Adventure Time? It's no secret that we're fans, and apparently the characters of Steven Universe are too. Those with keen eyes may have spotted a stuffed animal of Gunter, everyone's favorite denizen of the Ice Kingdom, in Sadie's bedroom. Sorry, Ice King. The little Gunter is prominently seen in the episode Sadie's Song, but we like to believe he's always there to keep her company, because that's just what Gunter does. You know, when he's not turning into a monster or trying to take over the known universe. Steven's toys. Not to be outdone by Sadie's adorable little Gunter, Steven himself has several toys that serve as nods to popular characters from other franchises. In the episode Future Vision, we get a glimpse of Steven's collection, and spy figures that resemble Yoshi, Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, a Furby, and some Transformers. It seems like Steven has some pretty good taste. I wonder if in an alternate reality, Optimus Prime has a Steven Universe action figure. Though, something tells me Optimus is more of a Garnet kind of guy. Full House. Netflix isn't the only one who returned to the world of Full House. In the episode Cheeseburger Backpack, you know, the one where Steven gets the cheeseburger backpack, there are several references to the beloved 90s sitcom. In addition to the fact that Mailman Jamie bears a passing resemblance to Danny Tanner, Steven also delivers Michelle Tanner's iconic catchphrase, "You got it, dude," during action. Considering the fact that the Olsen twins didn't return to reprise the role of Michelle for Fuller House, we'll gladly take Steven as their plucky replacement. Prince, Purple Rain. In the wake of the passing of pop icon and music legend Prince, we've seen numerous tributes and homages offered by some of the world's most celebrated artists and creative talent. Even before his untimely death, creators would frequently cite Prince as a strong influence on their work. Steven Universe offered its own unique homage to Prince in the episode Joyride, with Buck telling Steven, "I only wanted to see you laughing in the pizza rain," an obvious reference to Prince's beloved song, and album, and film of the same name. Steven doesn't catch it though. It's okay, Steven. That's what this video is for. Akira. And now we enter the multitudinous anime nods. In Cat Fingers, Steven's transformation mirrors the epic and emotionally scarring transformation of Tetsuo in the genre-defining anime classic Akira. Luckily, like Tetsuo, Steven didn't kill many people beforehand. Sailor Moon. I mean, who doesn't love cartoons, right? Obviously we do, and we're guessing you do, and it's pretty obvious Steven does too. Based on hints we spied in the series, we get a sense that Steven is a big fan of Sailor Moon in particular. A manga featuring the popular character can be spotted on Steven's nightstand, and that cat-like does look quite a bit like Luna, Serena's cat and advisor on Sailor Moon. Furthermore, the central concept of the Gems, a team of super beings who draw their power from different elemental stones, has a strong parallel to the Sailor Scouts, whose powers are reflections of the planets they represent. Steven may actually be living his favorite cartoon fantasy without even realizing it. Dragon Ball Z. Speaking of parallels to popular anime manga series, how can we not talk about Dragon Ball Z? I mean, there are enough we could do a whole video on it. The gems have been known to fuse their personas and powers together to form new personalities in the heat of battle. The process of fusion is achieved via a special dance, which is also exactly how fusion is achieved by characters in Dragon Ball Z. It's a subtle reference, but a nice nod that leads us to wonder what a Saiyan Gems dance-off would look like. Similarly, the device Hopper uses to measure power is reminiscent of a scouter for Dragon Ball, which is utilized to read power levels. As anyone who's ever watched Dragon Ball Z or its subsequent incarnations can tell you, there's a lot of standing around and powering up, which means these devices sure come in handy. Much like its DBZ counterpart, the device in Steven Universe will explode if someone exceeds their expected power level, proving, as ever, that tech companies are always going to try and get you to upgrade to the latest edition. Oh, and for you fans of the original Dragon Ball, you know, the ones where they actually collect the Dragon Balls, there's a subtle reference in the episode Steven and the Sword Fighter, where Amethyst is flying on a cloud. This seems to be an allusion to Nimbus, little Goku's original means of transportation before he grew up, discovered he was an alien, and could fly for himself. Not a bad means of transportation if you ask us. Cowboy Bebop. Can't get enough of the anime references? Neither can we! One of our favorite shows is cult classic Cowboy Bebop, and we were thrilled to discover this subtle reference to the series in the episode Lion 3 straight to video. When Steven and Sadie sit down to watch a video left behind by Rose, the sequence, as well as the contents of the video itself, mirrors a similar tape in the Cowboy Bebop episode Speak Like a Child. In both instances, the videotapes are meant as time capsules, giving the characters a glimpse into the world before and have a significant emotional impact, since they depict something long lost for the intended viewer. Also, both videos involve beaches, which is definitely on the lighter side for the parallel. For Steven Universe to echo this particular moment in Cowboy Bebop's history is a brilliant and poignant homage to the gateway anime. Pokemon. Speaking of the episode Future Vision, if you Pokemon fans thought that the insect-like monsters attacking Steven looked familiar, you be quite correct. Lame pun intended. The vicious little beasties in this episode are meant to resemble Beedrills. Considering the attack happens in Steven's imagination, we can only assume their presence is brought on by the overactive flights of fancy of an intense Pokemon fan. I mean, who among us hasn't briefly fantasized about what it'd be like to encounter Pokemon in real life? I mean, hopefully your fantasies are a little more pleasant than this one. Funland Arcade. In the episode Arcade Mania, Steven encounters the game Teens of Rage, which is a blatant reference to the Sega arcade game called Streets of Rage. Furthermore, the company who allegedly makes Teens of Rage is called Carpcom, a nod to popular gaming company Capcom. Another game seen in Funland Arcade is Meat Beat Mania. The name is a play on Beat Mania, but the gameplay itself parodies Samba de Amigo. As if all of this wasn't enough, Steven Universe has to break another wall. The arcade Steven and the Gems visit, Funland, bears the same name as the arcade in the Amazing World of Gumball, Reanimator. In the episode Nightmare Hospital, wherein a doctor experiments on gem biology, we overhear a conversation that refers to another staff member, Dr. West. Committed fans of the horror genre will recognize this as a direct reference to Dr. Herbert West, the primary character of the cult classic Reanimator and its subsequent sequels. In those films, as well as the original H.P. Lovecraft story, Dr. West is known for his arcane experiments on biology, quite similar to what Dr. Maheshwaran was attempting to do with the gems in the episode. So, Fright fans who've been clamoring for a new sequel, Dr. West didn't disappear, he just got animated. Or is that reanimated? Dun dun dun! Batman. In the episode Lion 2 the Movie, we get the debut of the giant penny, an object from Rose's secret armory. The penny, as well as the cave in which it's found, is a reference to another popular cave dweller, Batman, of course. A giant penny was a fixture of the Batcave in the comics, as well as a staple set piece in Batman the Animated Series. Reduced to a mere conversation piece in the modern era, the penny was actually a trophy scored by Batman following the defeat of a lesser-known villain called the Penny Plunderer. Though the Penny Plunderer didn't quite make his mark on Batman's rogue gallery the way that Joker or the Riddler have, his brief encounter with the Cape Crusader left us with one of the Batcave's most identifiable landmarks. Maybe Rose has had a brush with him too. Full Metal Alchemist. In the episode Gem Drill, the scenes focusing on the cluster bear a resemblance to the souls in the Philosopher's Stone from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. The way Steven deals with the situation, by having many parts of the cluster become friends and get to know each other, is similar to how Van Hohenheim from Full Metal decided to cope with his status as a living Philosopher's Stone. If it's any correlation between the two beyond the Easter egg itself, it's the tears we've shed for both scenes. And there you have it, our favorite Steven Universe Easter eggs. Steven Universe is a vast and fully realized world, and the people behind the show are including nods and tributes to their favorite things within the confines constantly. So there's plenty references we didn't get to. If there's an homage in the show that you particularly love, tell us in the comments. And hey, check out some of our other videos in the annotations. Don't forget to subscribe to Channel Frederator so you don't miss a thing. Remember, Frederator loves you.
If you grew grew up in the 90s, then you probably knew about Pokemon and Digimon. And if you weren't a 90s kid, then you probably still know what they are, because they're just as popular now as they were back then. Know what else hasn't changed? The ongoing debate between Pokemon and Digimon fans about which is better. But look past the cute creatures and find their human partners, and you'll find a trove of new information for both series. Hi, I'm Adrian with Channel Frederator, and today we're giving a fair comparison between Pokemon and Digimon. Ready to learn? Digital origins. Both franchises can trace their roots to Japan, but if you're a fan, then you already knew that. In Japan, neither Pokemon nor Digimon started out as an animated series, but in North America, the anime shows released as a precursor to the games. Production for Pokemon started way back in 1990 after its creator Satoshi Tajiri saw two Game Boys connected via a link cable, but back then it wasn't called Pokemon. It's hard to imagine it by any other name, but the franchise we all know and love was originally going to be called Capsule Monsters. Gameplay was slightly different too. Trainers used charisma and capsules to capture monsters, and the trainers themselves would participate in the battles. However, Satoshi Tajiri had trouble copywriting the name Capsule Monsters, so he changed the name to Kapumon, and then eventually settled on Pocket Monsters and Pokemon. 6 years and one nearly bankrupt studio later, in 1996, Pocket Monsters Green and Pocket Monsters Red were released for the Game Boy in Japan. Fast forward 2 more years, and slightly revamped versions of the games, titled Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, were released in the US, and I think you know how the rest of the story goes. In much of the same way, Digimon also had digital origins, but rather than games, it was based on digital pet toys known as Digital Monsters. Released in 1997, 1 year after the first Pokemon games debuted, Digital Monsters, nicknamed Digimon, were extremely popular. They resembled other popular digital pet toys at the time, such as Tamagotchi, where you needed to clean, play with, and feed your virtual pet. Ever wonder why Digimon was so similar to Tamagotchi? Fun fact, that's because they were created by the same person. Yes, Tamagotchi's creator Aki Maita helped Japanese toy company Bandai develop a so-called boy version of Tamagotchi after sales indicated that more females were playing the latter. This is ironic because Tamagotchi was originally intended to be a gender-neutral toy. Digital Monsters was so popular that at least 5 different versions of the toy were released, including anniversary releases and upgrades. Each virtual pet could be nurtured until they evolved into their final form. Some could even fight other Digimon. Aw, all grown up. TV origins. In the 90s, just releasing a game wasn't enough. For all intents and purposes, this was a pre-internet era, and if you wanted to sell games, you had to do much more than make games. To help reach a broader audience and potentially drive game sales, games were often also adapted into anime series, which is why you had the joy of watching both Pokemon and Digimon on Saturday mornings, along with all those other great franchise anime, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, etc. The Pokemon anime is loosely based on the plot of the games. It adapted many of the key moments from the games and incorporated them into an original storyline, but also took some creative liberties. In doing so, it kept the anime a bit more fresh. You weren't just watching the same exact events play out, but rather you got to see the events from a slightly different standpoint. The anime also allowed Pokemon to flesh out some of the characters from within the games, like Brock and Misty, who were previously nothing more than just the Pewter City and Cerulean City gym leaders. And thank Arceus they did, because I don't want to live in a world without Brock's drying pans. Okay, I know you guys are gonna get up on my pronunciation of Arceus, but there are so many different ones, so shh. Anyway, what about Digimon? Since Digimon began as a digital pet toy, there were no storylines or characters for the anime series to reference, except for some of the Digimon from the virtual pet toy. For example, the first Digital Monster toys introduced Patamon, Greymon, and Gabumon, all Digimon that appeared in Digimon Adventure. The Digivice designs from the series were loosely based on what the toys looked like, except for some like the 1999 Digivice toy, which took the Digivice design straight from the TV series. This enabled each Digimon series to be unique and introduce similar concepts, but entirely different characters. Think of it as multiple universes. The exception to this are the sequels, and those were very few. Take Digimon Tri for instance. It directly followed the first 2 seasons of Digimon, Digimon Adventure and Digimon Adventure 2. With a change in art and a more mature tone, Digimon Tri was met with generally positive to mixed reactions. Some fans appreciated the more adult aspect of the show, as many viewers had grown up with the first 2 Digimon seasons. Others weren't fond of the different art style and some of the characters' reactions to being involved with the digital world again. Monster variation. While both franchises revolved around battling mons, the monsters themselves couldn't be more different. Pokemon come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. While a good chunk seem to be animal-based, there are also plenty of Pokemon that are plant-based, inanimate objects, or even humanoid. They're friends of humans. Some are even capable of speaking the human language. Pokemon are so common in the world that they've effectively replaced real animals. While earlier editions of the anime make mention of real-world animals, they generally aren't seen in the show nowadays. The Pokédex often uses real-world animals to categorize Pokemon, for example, example Rockruff as the puppy Pokemon, but animals haven't been seen in the Pokemon games. Since they're physical creatures, Pokemon are capable of dying, as was shown through Lavender Town's Pokemon Tower. If you're not familiar with it, the Pokemon Tower was a resting place for Pokemon that passed away. Unlike Pokemon, Digimon are made up of data, and thus have no real physical form. They also don't live amongst humans, originating instead from a digital world that is parallel to Earth. Because of this, when Digimon are deleted, they either regenerate into a Digi-Egg or become pieces of data that other Digimon can absorb. They don't truly die in the sense that Pokemon can. Digimon have also been shown to be very advanced, as they're able to build complex villages and societies. They can also speak the human language. Pokemon have also been shown to build societies, but they tend to be more primitive than those that Digimon create, at least so far. Evolution. Ah yes, evolution. It's been and still is a cause for big debate between Pokemon and Digimon fans due to the similarities in the concept of evolution itself. However, there are some key differences that set them apart. For the first 13 years of Pokemon, evolutions were permanent and were triggered by special circumstances, leveling up, trading, or elemental stones. As the series aged, evolution methods have become even more complex. Some require Pokemon to know a specific move, while others are gender specific. And in the case of one Pokemon, evolution requires holding your 3DS upside down while the Pokemon leveled up. Most Pokemon have 2 to 3 different evolutions. Digimon, on the other hand, generally do not have permanent evolutions. Because they themselves and their evolutions are made up of data, any evolution that Digimon go through eventually comes undone, kind of like using Control-Z. That's why evolved Digimon often revert back to their original form when they're injured, hungry, or weak. When Digimon evolve, they can have more than 3 evolutions. Some can even have 6 evolution levels. Phew! That's a lot to keep track of. Potentially borrowing a note from Digimon, in 2014's release of Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, Pokemon no longer were tied to a permanent evolution. Once per battle, certain Pokemon can Mega Evolve, and at the end of the battle, they would revert to their original form. Fan reception. A common point of comparison for Pokemon and Digimon has been fan reception. Yes, both series are popular, but generally for different reasons. For a while, the Pokemon anime was geared more towards children, and thus the audience skewed younger. Fans of Pokemon typically enjoyed the games more than they did the animated series. While the games were played by players of all ages, most older fans stayed away from the anime. With the release of the Pokemon XY series, many older fans found themselves tuning back into the series as the show had a much more mature feel to it. With better character development, fantastic looking battles, seriously, if you haven't seen any from this run of the show, go check them out. And Ash's closest shot at winning a Pokemon League, he finished second, the best he's ever finished. The anime finally started to regain the attention of some older fans. Digimon was the opposite. The Digital Monsters virtual pet toys were popular, but when it really came down to the franchise as a whole, what fans really enjoyed were the first 3 seasons of the Digimon animated series. And for good reason. They covered darker themes than Pokemon did, especially the 3rd Digimon season, Digimon Tamers. It's also worth mentioning that these 2 anime are on 2 very different levels as far as total amount of content is concerned. The Digimon anime ran for more than 5 seasons with over 200 episodes, while Pokemon had over 900 episodes and still running across 20 seasons. There's definitely more Pokemon to be analyzed here. Themes and tone. Pokemon and Digimon both had similar themes, but different ways of portraying them. Pokemon is undeniably more upbeat and lighthearted, with more comedic moments and strong emphasis on friendship and love. The friendship aspect is shown through interactions between the characters as well as their relationships with their Pokemon. For instance, when bonds between Pokemon and their trainers become stronger, then they as a team become more powerful in battles. A great example would be any battle that Ash fights in with Pikachu. Whenever Pikachu looks like he'll be defeated, his love for Ash and the boys' support help the Pokemon get back on his feet and reign victorious. The themes of friendship extend through Ash's journey to find new Pokemon, and also through his new friendships with the characters from the different regions. In each series of the Pokemon anime, Ash travels to a new land in search of Pokemon. He almost always starts out fresh with no Pokemon, Pikachu being the exception, and gains some Pokemon through friendship. Along the way on his journey, he almost always befriends a gym leader and the female version of the game's playable character. Digimon had a similar concept in terms of having friendship and teamwork play a key role in strength. The stronger a Digimon and its partner's bonds were, the stronger they became in battle. Strong bonds also led to Digimon being able to evolve more quickly than if they didn't have a human partner. They could also stay in an evolved form a little longer. But apart from friendship and teamwork, Digimon also handled other themes, and they were comparatively darker and heavier than the ones in Pokemon. Digimon really focused on individual strength, and the human characters had complicated life situations that they needed to overcome in order to grow. One example of this is Matt and TK's family situation from Digimon Adventure. Although their siblings related by blood, episode, Matt and TK have different surnames because their parents are divorced. They become separated for a long time, and the prolonged separation creates tension between them when they finally reunite. But as they overcome obstacles together, the two grow closer as brothers. In addition to themes of family, the Digimon franchise as a whole also tackled topics such as bravery, death, and love, as well as issues such as bullying, isolation, and insecurities. This is notable in the Digimon series, Digimon Frontier, because all of the main characters have hardships that they must conquer in order to successfully spirit evolve into powerful Digimon. But if we had to name the darkest Digimon season, it would have to go to Digimon Tamers. Why, you ask? First of all, the head writer was Chiaki J. Konaka, known for his work on the anime Serial Experiments Lain. If you're not really familiar with that anime series, well, here's the gist. It tells the story of a young girl who forms a connection to a virtual reality network. It handled themes such as identity and the nature of reality. The series had an overall very dark and philosophical tone, and this transferred over to Digimon Tamers. Its tone and story definitely took inspiration from Serial Experiments Lain, as well as some aspects of Neon Genesis Evangelion. These include the more sci-fi aspect of how the digital world and human world are connected, introducing the idea of human-Digimon fusion, as well as the very realistic events in the story and how the characters react to them. The story surrounding Jeri Kato is one example of this. Her mother passed away and she has trouble accepting her stepmother. She also falls into depression after her Digimon partner dies and presumably attempts suicide at one point. The humans and their Digimon partners are also forced apart, potentially never seeing one another again. Digimon Tamers was overall a very dark and gloomy series. Such heavy themes weren't really addressed in Pokemon, at least not to the extent that Digimon had. If anything, Pokemon taught you not to steal. I'm watching you, Team Rocket. And there you have it. I'm Adrian, and thanks for watching Pokemon vs. Digimon. What's your favorite Pokemon or Digimon moment? What do you like about these two series? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to click that bell to become part of the notification squad. If you like that video, make sure to hit subscribe so you always know when we have something new. Because remember, Frederator loves you.
The Amazing World of Gumball is amazing for all sorts of reasons. Blue cats, pink bunnies, talking potatoes, but the most amazing thing about The Amazing World of Gumball isn't all that it has, it's all that it takes. Gumball is known for its references. It takes from movies, video games, and memes and makes those worlds its own world. Hi, I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and today we're here to check out Gumball's amazing world of memes and references, because they're that good. Super Saiyan formed from Dragon Ball Z in The Others, Season 4, Episode 2. It's no secret that Ben Boclet, the creator of The Amazing World of Gumball, is an avid fan of Dragon Ball Z. It comes as no surprise to us. In the episode The Others, Gumball attempts to harness the power within and screams loudly in the school hallway to the point where his face turns red and his voice cracks. We've all been there. That's not the best part though. 5 episodes later, Gumball achieves this transformation after he learns his sister is a victim of bullying. This goes with the Dragon Ball concept of Saiyans unlocking their super form when they feel extreme levels of anger or desperate need instead of just simply wanting to be one. Man, even Gumball turns Super Saiyan faster than Vegeta. Sorry, buddy. Sailor Moon in The Lie, Season 3, Episode 26. We didn't need it, but we got it, and we love it. For those of you who don't know, Sailor Moon is the Japanese shoujo anime series that follows a young schoolgirl and her transformation into a magical superhero with her artifact, the legendary Silver Crystal. The transformations themselves are one of the most iconic in anime and popular culture and have been recreated in multiple shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and One Punch Man, just to name a few. It only made sense that Gumball would have a throw at it, and honestly, it's probably one of the best. Why? This transformation involves cheese, bacon, processed meats, and carbs. The power of all four creates the Sluzzlewurst, an icon all its own. Star Wars A New Hope in The Recipe, Season 3, Episode 6. No show is considered cool until a Star Wars reference is made, and thankfully there are plenty. One of our favorites is in the episode The Recipe. The episode is based around the mystery of Anton's respawning, since he got all soggy and drowned in the school pool. Long story short, Gumball and Darwin discover the power of the Toaster, a device that holds the power to create an army of Antons, resulting in the creation of Ant-1 and his army. When Ant-1, a bred clone of Anton, turns on the fire sprinklers and destroys the other Anton clones due to their failure as an army, Richard, who is far off in the scene, declares,
"I feel a great disturbance in the food chain, as if 1,000 sandwiches cried out in terror and was suddenly silenced."
This is a direct reference to Star Wars A New Hope when Alderaan is destroyed and Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced." May the toast be with you, Gumball. How to Basic in The Traitor, Season 4, Episode 19. If you, like us, have spent countless hours falling into the YouTube rabbit hole or just wanted to know how to make that cheeseburger pizza, you've probably stumbled upon the internet treasure How To Basic. It's a channel that makes tutorials that usually involve lots of destruction and raw eggs. In the episode The Traitor, there's a scene that begins with Gumball combing his hair and pulling his face upwards. He then makes a huge sandwich with a number of ingredients, from carrots to sushi. He then throws it in the oven, but not before giving the finished product a gentle pet. Our only critique? Not enough eggs. The way the sandwich is prepared is a straight reference to those popular videos. It has also led many to believe that Gumball himself is actually How To Basic. And we can't argue this theory because it makes 100% sense. Kill La Kill in The Fury, Season 4, Episode 37. It would be a real crime not to mention one of the most mind-blowing scenes in television history. What, too much? In the episode The Fury, Gumball's art style changes in the dramatic battle between Nicole and Yuki, much in the style of the popular anime Kill La Kill. The creative team of Gumball wanted Studio Trigger, the studio behind Kill La Kill, and Kiznaiver to animate the battle, but they teamed up with Studio 4C, who are known for Tekken Concrete and Genius Party, among other works. Despite going with a different studio, the scene has all the similar action shots and aesthetics that Kill La Kill is praised for, and if you're not into the show, you can just enjoy this epic scene for what it is. The Legend of Zelda in The Promise, Season 2, Episode 37. Okay, so there are countless Zelda references sprinkled throughout the amazing world of Gumball. We could make a video just based on those references alone. But let's take a look at this particular one for this video. In the episode The Promise, both Gumball and Darwin flip out over the Tale of Zelmore's game release. Let's note that the graphics, the music, and practically everything about the game screams Zelda. This reference is further established when Gumball pulls the Tale of Zelmore CD out of the case, which heavily alludes to Link looting a chest in the 3D Zelda games. While there are many clues proving that the writers for Gumball are all Zelda diehards, one thing's for certain, there's more to come. Also, shout out to the boombox when Gumball whistles the first part of Zelda's lullaby to a squirrel to lure it to sleep. Sweet, warm nostalgia. Donald Trump in The Vase, Season 5, Episode 15. Gumball isn't the first cartoon to throw their hat into the ring of politics, but they were able to do it and not even get their hat all that dirty as a result. The shoutout wasn't verbal, but anyone who watches some form of cable news recognized that faces that Nicole makes when subtly encouraging her children to break Granny JoJo's vase. See, the 45th President of the United States, that's Trump, has made some pretty weird faces, especially during the GOP debate in California. Nicole impersonates those faces so well. Some people have even said that it was the single best impersonation ever made in the history of television impersonations. We rest our case. Attack on Titan in The Nobody, Season 3, Episode 36. With Attack on Titan's Season 2 release, we can't ignore any references made by popular TV shows. In The Nobody, Gumball and Darwin are locked in their rooms for crimes they did not commit. When they spot a mysterious person in the room, they run after him. Thinking that the suspect may be more afraid of them than they are of the mysterious person, they attempt to run less scary. The result is an ironic failure to humanity, foreshadowing its demise in the scenes to come. Alright, maybe it's not that dire, they just crash a car, injure Tina, and damage a truck, but they look like titans while they're doing it. Ugh, they even had the creepy smiles and arm flailing down to a T. Kill Bill references in The Banana and The Move. If you're a fan of martial arts and revenge sagas, there's a high chance you have both volumes of Kill Bill in close proximity to whatever you consider your DVD player to be at this point. If not, you have unfinished business, my friend. Once you've seen the movies, there's no denying that it's easy to spot references in multiple movies and television series, and The Amazing World of Gumball is no exception. Much of the film's music and noteworthy scenes have been reworked into hilarious cracks. From the iconic whistle in The Banana to the Lonely Shepherd remix in The Burden, the callback immediately dramatizes a scene, but in the Gumball way. One reference that succeeds all the others is the 7-pressure point heart disintegrating technique, as seen in the episode The Move. This is a reference to Kill Bill's 5-point palm exploding heart technique. While Clayton claims he knows martial arts, he goes a step further and performs the move on Tobias. Tobias even takes a few steps away before collapsing the same way the Kill Bill victims did. While hiding bodies has never really been an issue in Tarantino films, it becomes the running gag throughout the Gumball episode. That is some good filmmaking. The zombie apocalypse genre in The Joy, Season 3, Episode 4. The episode The Joy is just chock full of various references to works involving the zombie apocalypse, utilizing pretty much every trope you can think of. For instance, Miss Simian's depressing music is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which is a bit of an odd choice until you remember that it's the exact same music from a puzzle in the first Resident Evil game. If that doesn't convince you, there's also the scene of Miss Simian getting past a horde of joy zombies by acting like one. This is incredibly reminiscent of a scene from 2004's comedy horror classic, Shaun of the Dead. Not to mention that the use of a handheld camera perspective is a whole genre of horror film in and of itself, and also used in such zombie films as Quarantine, Wreck, and Diary of the Dead. And there we have it. I'm Jacob, and thanks for watching Gumball's amazing world of memes and references. Did you like our choices? Do you want to see more? Comment below and let us know. We have new videos dropping every day, so make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to smash that bell icon to become part of our notification squad. And remember, Frederator loves you.
It's crazy to think that 20 years ago, a raunchy cartoon with animation made of construction paper cutouts premiered on Comedy Central. 2 decades later, South Park is still going strong. It's become almost as iconic to the world of parody and satire as SNL, and even then, South Park's willingness to offend has placed the show in a league of its own with its social commentary. What's up everyone, this is Adrian with Channel Frederator, and today we're talking about how South Park has changed over the course of its 20 seasons, which, spoiler alert, is quite a bit. So get ready for some serious political incorrectness, because it's time to talk about South Park, then versus now. Okay. The creation process. One thing that South Park has kept the same is its insanely fast 6-day production schedule. Most animated shows are made over the course of 3 to 10 months, which really puts into perspective how much the South Park team pushes themselves. Plus, it helps keep their satire fresh and current. What did change, however, was the way they do their animation. Any viewer from the past 2 decades can easily pinpoint South Park's distinctive animation style. It has the unique flair of someone who put it together using construction paper, but how they make it look that way has been updated with the advance of technology. The Spirit of Christmas, the original 5-minute short that would become South Park, was made by Parker and Stone using construction paper cutouts in stop motion. This spirit, excuse the pun, was kept once the show made it big. Back in the 90s, the animators tried to keep the look of the show as crappy as possible. They scanned the construction paper cutouts and then used state-of-the-art animation to make it look cheap and amateurish. They primarily used the program Power Animator for the first 4 seasons. As time progressed, the South Park team was able to use computer animation technology to streamline the process. Starting with the 5th season, the staff began using Maya, a standard program in the industry, which can replicate the movement that paper would make in the real world. The physical cutout figures used for characters and scenes were scanned into computers, and Maya took care of the rest. Okay, really, the animators did, but using Maya helped. The team has a library of all kinds of props, backgrounds, and characters accumulated over 10 years that they recycle to save time. But it's not exactly a piece of cake. New animators and technical directors that join the staff have to go through a whole training process to learn how to do things the South Park way. In fact, the 5th season ended up being postponed for 6 months so the staff at the time could learn to use Maya. I guess when you have a 6-day turnaround, there's no real waiting to get the hang of things. The style of humor. South Park's humor has always been crude and aggressive, if not also topical, intelligent, and insightful. However, its early days were mostly focused on the crude and aggressive half rather than the topical and intelligent half. The first few seasons of South Park are somewhat more juvenile, looking a bit like Parker and Stone were trying to figure out what they could get away with on cable TV. Later seasons, however, are more sharply satirical, aging with the creators themselves and channeling their cynicism with whatever's happening in the world into comedy. Another factor that's changed with the aging of the creators is the shift in focus to more adult characters, and as a result, the jokes themselves have even been coming out of the adults more now, versus primarily being delivered by the kids in earlier seasons. Matt Stone explained, instead of Stan or any of the other boys having this big voice, it's Randy, Stan's father, who has the big voice, and it's because that's who we relate to now. Luckily, Stan has a grandpa because the jokes will probably move to him eventually. In current seasons, Stan's father, Randy, has become a much more prominent character, going from bumbling doofus to a centerpiece of several episodes who always means well. Leanne, Cartman's mother, started out the show as a doormat who spoiled her ill-behaved son, but has put down the proverbial boot more often in recent seasons, like when she punishes Cartman for beating up his friends, and for his foul mouth, in Coon 2 Hindsight, and she even yells at him in public in Human Sentai Pad. And of course, the jokes and running gags used in episodes have changed over the years too. Kenny, for example, hasn't been killed in years. This was a gag used in every episode in the first 5 seasons, but the creative team eventually exhausted the joke. Stone and Parker tried to kill kill off poor Kenny permanently in season 6 and had Tweek and Butters take his place, but it didn't stick and he came back in the season's finale. Since then, Kenny hasn't died anywhere near as often. Older seasons often ended with Kyle remarking, "You know, I learned something today," but that gag has faded with the many deaths of Kenny. Poor Butters, however, gets grounded very often nowadays, and Mr. Garrison's change in gender to Mrs. Garrison didn't last long. But one thing that South Park's always made fun of: politics. A major evolution in the show's humor has come pretty recently. South Park won't be making fun of the Commander-in-Chief. Donald Trump had a cameo way back in season 5, but for obvious reasons, he's a much bigger deal nowadays. But Stone and Parker don't have any plans of presidential satire. As Trey Parker explained, "It's tricky now because satire has become reality." He added, "We couldn't keep up, and what was actually happening was much funnier than anything we could come up with. So we decided to kind of back off and let them do their comedy, and we'll do ours." Characters. The first couple of seasons had a much smaller speaking main cast, consisting primarily of the 4 boys, fellow 3rd grader Wendy Testaberger, and occasional appearances from Tweek, as well as some of the boys' parents. As the show progressed, classmates Timmy Birch, Token Black, BB Stevens, Craig Tucker, and of course Butters became more prominent. Butters has become a more central character, and his relationship with the core cast has been expanded upon in more recent seasons, as he's often an accessory to Cartman's plans, whether or not he wants to be. The main characters of South Park have always been kids, but as mentioned, there's been a recent shift in focus to the adults, including a new nightlife spot of the town called Soda Sopa. In addition, the kids were only in 3rd grade for the first 58 episodes, after which they graduated and have since been in 4th grade. What a difference. There's also a new school administrator named PC Principal who shames people for not being politically correct, and sometimes even gets violent to those who won't conform. He's in PC fraternity and soon gets Randy to pledge. Another major difference is the absence of the beloved Chef in current seasons. Chef and his good-natured advice, cue the "hello there children," was a constant presence for a major portion of the show's run. His voice actor, soul singer Isaac Hayes, had a stroke in 2006 and lost the ability to speak. During that 9th season, a few months after South Park mocked Scientology, his representatives, most of whom were Scientologists, sent a letter of resignation on Hayes' behalf, according to Hayes' son, Isaac Hayes III. Well, one thing's for sure, we miss you, Chef. You and your chocolate salty balls. Title sequence. One of the best parts of the show is its iconic opening sequence and song, but that's changed a few times over the years. The original sequence shows different characters and scenes coming in and out, while a lookalike of Les Claypool, the lead singer and bassist of the band Primus, who did the intro, plays the theme song, and the boys chime in, of course, as they head to school. For seasons 4 and 5, it started out the same, but then the song stops and the words 4th grade pop up, and everything's revamped. You can see old scenes in the background, and they also show a 3D version of each character, along with stats and possible other characters to make it look like a video game. It ends with live action footage of someone jumping away from an explosion, which is apparently a clip from the movie Bad Boys. Season 6 began the sped up construction paper design, and since Kenny was now permanently dead, Timmy sang his lines. Old scenes were shown again, and the crowd shot at the end began with Butters holding a sign that said, "The Butters Show," and later changed to Professor Chaos knocking the sign over. And the title sequence stayed that way until season 12, when they reverted it back to the original intro format, give or take a few minor changes, like the music being a rock version. Seasons 14 through 16 shows the boys singing scenes based off of former episodes, and for some clips, the rest of the picture turns to monochrome, except for the character singing. It uses the same rock-style theme song. From season 17 and on, the sequence got an entire makeover. The opening sequence is similar to that of the original seasons, except it's done in 3D. Pretty cool. Don't know how they'll top that for the next revamp, but looking forward to finding out. The fans. South Park takes place in the titular fake town in Colorado, which means that there's quite a bit of references, spoofs, and teasing regarding the Centennial State. But people aren't always particularly receptive to being made fun of, so for over half of the show's run, the entire state of Colorado weren't fans of the series. But all of this changed during the Democratic National Convention in 2008. The Denver International Airport's display of Colorado for visitors included South Park among the things that Coloradans were proud of. This affirmation was a huge deal for Stone and Parker, and the current governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper, has openly said that the show is smart and that its biting satire is important to keeping American culture and democracy honest. As is the case with other long-running shows, some fans of the show have aged while others weren't even alive when the show began. Kids back then used to get in trouble for wearing South Park t-shirts to school when the show first started, but now Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny are too ingrained in culture for anyone to bat an eye. The web, not even a decade old when South Park aired, has helped fans of the show talk to each other and share theories more and more over the years. Many fans of the show have been critical in recent seasons. Much like with fans of The Simpsons, there's been a lot of talk of the show becoming stale or running out of ideas. Criticisms have been levied at the show aging a bit, with what used to be edgy and forward-thinking humor willing to mock both sides, becoming less unique with age. But that doesn't mean the show still isn't funny and sharp, finding ways to riff on everything we hold sacred and reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously. Episode structure. The number one biggest change since South Park's beginnings is the switch to a serialized structure. Up until season 19, the episodes were standalone stories that weren't necessarily connected to each other. Matt Stone explained that it was a different time in television back then, when he had to do this sitcom-style reset every week. But TV shows and audiences have both progressed to be able to handle following a storyline through nowadays. So for season 19, they created 10 episodes that were all connected under the theme of political correctness. Thus came PC Principle, and the show now even references its own episodes. In Tweak X Craig, Randy says our town has only had a Whole Foods for 3 weeks, and we already have our first gay kids. So cool. This is a reference to a previous episode titled The City Part of Town, in which the town campaigns for Whole Foods to come to the area. You can even see Cartman's out-of-control yelping in the episode You're Not Yelping, and then you see his obsession with his online presence again in Safe Space, as well as Randy's anxieties during his Whole Foods shopping experience. Hello, continuity. And there you have it, everyone. I'm Adrian, and thanks for watching Then vs. Now South Park. How do you think South Park's changed over the years? Share your thoughts in the comment section below, and click that bell icon to become part of the notification squad. Don't forget to subscribe to Channel Frederator for more awesome content, because remember, Frederator loves you.
En een zwaard tegen Frederator! Waar slaat dat op? Valt mij.
It was so long since we saw any new episodes of Rick and Morty, before suddenly, burger time, a new episode appeared out of nowhere in April 2017. Whether you're a Rick and Morty fanatic keeping up with every episode, or someone new wondering why everyone is suddenly talking about a McNugget sauce from 1998, we got the details of the Season 3 premiere covered. Hi, I'm Justin with Channel Frederator, and we're here to give you 7 facts about Rick and Morty Season 3, Episode 1, The Rick Shank Redemption. Let's get started before you can cry out, Wubba Lubba Dub Dub! Before the surprise premiere of Season 3, we hadn't had a new episode of Rick and Morty since the Season 2 finale in fall 2015, and quite understandably, the multitudes of hardcore Rick and Morty fans have been chomping at the bit for more. Well, Dan Harmon invited fans to place the blame for the delay entirely on himself. Quote, Rick and Morty keeps taking longer and longer to write, and I don't know why, he said in January 2017. Though of course there's an entire room of writers on Rick and Morty, and Harmon also mentioned that there was more in good spirit fighting going on about the show's direction. Not like I hate you, I'm gonna choke you fights, more like this joke is funnier fights. And lastly, at the end of the day, it's up to Adult Swim, not Harmon or Roiland, when Rick and Morty airs, so us kids have to wait for the prime time or whatever. Also, drawing things does take a while, but hey, at least we had their recreation of the Georgia vs. Denver Fenton Allen trial to tide us over. The Season 3 premiere was the most epic April Fool's joke that's not actually a joke in recent memory. It was completely unannounced, taking fans by absolute surprise when Adult Swim began looping the episode on air and on their website on the night of April 1st. It was so sudden that many were initially skeptical that this could be possibly the real deal. Adult Swim Australia, in their infinite wisdom, promised fans an exclusive look into the opening scene of Season 3. They gave the video the very ominously vague title Rick and Morty New Clip, and when fans clicked on it, it was just a supercut of characters saying the lyrics to Never Gonna Give You Up, all taken from Seasons 1 and 2. This made many fans angrier than Mr. Meeseeks, who, if you remember, has been forced to stay alive for a grueling 24 hours. But earlier on April 1st, a fan nagged Harmon on Twitter for Season 3. Harmon's reply in retrospect was a dead giveaway. Quote, what if I waved a magic wand and made the first episode of Season 3 premiere tonight? Is that what you'd want? End quote. Of course, the fan as well as everyone else wanted that, but no one dared to think Harmon was this serious, which he obviously enjoyed, as he rubbed in the fan's face as soon as the episode aired, happy now motherfucker, but that was literally the only hint we got. If that agent's voice sounded familiar to you, it's probably because you've watched Firefly or Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog or Castle. In other words, you recognize Nathan Fillion. By the way, since he's met with such an unfortunate demise, we may also mention that the agent has a name, Corvelius Daniel, and he's a Gromflemite. There have been Gromflemites in Rick and Morty dating all the way back to the pilot, including objectively one of the best one-episode wonders, Crombopolis Michael. Anyway, it's also worth noting that the Season 3 premiere followed Rick and Morty's tried-and-true titling method of taking on unabashedly terrible puns. This one's called The Rick Shank Redemption, an obvious reference to the 1990 1994 film The Shawshank Redemption. In case classic 90s dramas aren't your vibe, The Shawshank Redemption is about Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins planning a jailbreak through some tunnels. See what they did there? It all happened so fast and in such a whirlwind of excitement that you probably didn't have the breath when the episode was over to sit back and contemplate everything that happened. But the Rick Shank Redemption did the most violent shaking up of the universe since season 1's epic Rick Potion number 9, known to most as the Cronenberg episode, and this will contain major spoilers, so you're warned. Remember, we know that our Rick is Rick C-137. We actually don't know that about our Morty though, but we'll get to that soon. And we know this universe is neither our Rick nor Morty's original. Anyway, Summer first digs up the body of her original Rick and steals his portal gun, just in case you've wondered if she forgot about that. Then, Rick body jumps multiple times, so that mind of Rick C-137 is no longer in the body of Rick C-137, which has the potential to be incredibly confusing for intergalactic authorities if any kind of government can keep itself together after that economy crash. In any case, it's great for our Rick, bad for, like, literally anyone else. Lastly, let's briefly talk about how the Smith family that we followed for the first 5.5 episodes of the series until Rick and Morty jump dimensions to escape the Cronenberg catastrophe died in this episode. Let's repeat, the protagonists that introduced us to the series were killed. Do you feel that weird numbness to that knowledge? That's the price of interdimensional travel. Just to warn you guys, more major spoilers are ahead. Morty spends the entire episode trying to prove to Summer that Rick is not a hero and that bad things happen when you get involved with him. There's been ample development of Morty's dark side throughout season 2, perhaps most notably in the penultimate episode, Look Who's Purging Now, where Morty basically discovers his capacity to kill. After harping on why Rick is a damaging presence again and again, Morty uses that capacity in a very deliberate way and attempts to shoot Rick to kill. Of course, the gun was a fake, but Morty totally knew that. This thread of character development has led some to speculate that our very Morty, often called the first Morty in fan communities, is destined to become the evil Morty from season 1's Close Encounters of the Rick Kind. Oof, those puns. However, it seems unlikely, considering that evil Morty appeared concurrently in time with the first Morty, and that Harmon and Roland have both said they are adamantly anti-time travel, despite the contents of Rick's supposed fake origin story from this episode. And stopping time is different, apparently. Besides, the theory that evil Morty is actually Morty C-137 and that the first Morty is not is quite intriguing indeed, but that's another matter entirely. Regardless of how the first Morty relates to evil Morty, it's pretty clear that our own Morty's arc is headed into some pretty dark territory indeed. The other popular fan theory that seemed for one bright, shining moment to get its own Rick Shank redemption was Rick's origin story, i.e. why did he abandon Beth and what happened to his wife? Many fans have capitulated for a long time that Rick's backstory featured a tragedy, very similar to the one shown in this episode, which led to Rick C-137 jumping into an alternate universe where Beth wasn't dead. Except, psych, that memory was a total fake, or was it? Honestly, given Rick's tendency to cover up his emotions behind all kinds of diversions, brash excuses, and non sequiturs, fans have been quick to point out that it's not impossible that there was some truth to that memory behind all of that pizzazz of Shoney's and Szechuan sauce. So, you know, speaking of that sauce, Rick's craving for McDonald's 1998 Mulan Szechuan McNugget dipping sauce becomes a rather unexpected central plot point of this episode, and potentially the whole series. 9 more seasons, Morty. And no sooner had the episode aired than Rick's craving literally became all of our craving too, and the whole ordeal went legitimately viral. To the supreme annoyance of all McDonald's employees, April 2nd was largely spent telling waves of Rick and Morty fans that no, they haven't carried that Szechuan sauce since 1998. But it didn't stop there. McDonald's was immediately bombarded with tweets from Rick and Morty fans and their wild yearning. Even a Change.org petition to bring back the sauce appeared that almost had 35,000 signatures at the time of the writing of this video. The frenzy got so intense that McDonald's actually responded to the Rick and Morty Twitter account, simply with McNugga Lubba Dub Dub, which, you know, how cute, I guess, right? Think it doesn't get any weirder? Well, the collective craving got so intense that a container of the sauce sold for $14,700 on eBay. Eesh. If you think the sauce was lovingly kept by someone waiting for this unavoidable, long-destined moment of cultural craving, well, you'd be wrong. The sauce packet in question was found by a man who bought a really old car and was cleaning it out, meaning it was sitting amidst dust in a car for 20 years, and in defense whoever bought that auction, it came with some McDonald's wasabi sauce as well, so I guess you could say they got a pretty great deal. But will the rest of us who don't have tens of thousands of dollars to spare on this ever get to taste this legendary sauce? A McDonald's spokesperson told USA Today that, quote, "We never say never," end quote. And the corporate chef of McDonald's said, quote, he'd see what he can do, end quote. With the live action version of Mulan coming out in 2018, it looks like we might not have to wait 97 years after all. Now that you've more or less come to terms with the fact that craving that sweet, spicy Szechuan sauce is now an essential part of your core being, you might naturally be wondering, when are we going to get the rest of Season 3? Unfortunately, right now we can say nothing more specific than this summer, but chin up, old pal, because there's a widespread rumor that Season 3 will contain 14 episodes, a swell upgrade from the usual 10. Plus, we know the name of Episode 2, Rick Manson the Stone. Meanwhile, if you're lucky enough to own an Oculus Rift or HTC Vive, there's a brand new Rick and Morty VR game called Virtual Reality to keep you occupied. It's supposedly pretty great. Better than a Plumbus? And that's the way the news goes. I'm Justin from Stuff with Scoutfly, and thanks for watching 7 Facts About Rick and Morty Season 3, Episode 1. Or do you have any precious memories of that sweet Szechuan dipping sauce you'd like to share? If so, tell us in the comment section down below, and click that little bell icon to become part of that awesome notification squad. You can check out more from me in the description down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new daily videos, and always remember, Frederator loves you.
Die gaat hierheen. Yeah.
Miraculous Ladybug and Cat Noir have made their way into the hearts of legions of fans in quite a short time. Their impact has been so big that we're anxiously awaiting for seasons 2 and 3. But in the meantime, we're gonna go back to season 1 and check out the pop culture references sprinkled throughout the show. Hey guys, I'm Brendan with Channel Frederator, and get ready for some epic homages, because this is 11 pop culture references in Miraculous Ladybug. Number 1, Hollywood director. In the episode Horrificator, when Marinette and the troupe are creating a video, she refers to Nino as Spielberg since he is handling directing duties. If you're very young or just like super clueless, Steven Spielberg is one of the most well-known directors in the history of film, having directed movies like Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, and Saving Private Ryan, just to name a few. He also produced animated shows like Animaniacs, Freakazoid, and Pinky and the Brain. Number 2, Star Wars Cam. In The Bubbler, Marinette visits the Agreste mansion with the humble mission of delivering Adrian's present. When she rings the bell, a sphere-shaped camera emerges. This camera is extremely similar to the one that can be seen in Star Wars' Return of the Jedi, when C-3PO rings on Jabba the Hutt's palace. Even though we think it's a bit extreme to compare Jabba the Hutt to Adrian, Marinette is just as nervous as Luke Skywalker's tiny butler robot. Number 3, 90s blockbuster movies. We know that some of you are already going, but where are my animal references? Don't worry, we got you covered. In the episode Animan, we can see an animal stampede that closely resembles the terrifying yet incredibly entertaining stampedes we saw in Jumanji back in 1995. And of course, since we've already established that the Miraculous Ladybug creators are Spielberg fans, there had to be a Jurassic Park reference here, which occurs when Animan turns into a T-Rex and tries to bring Ladybug out from a car, mimicking the epic scene from the 1993 film. Number 4, Respectful Robot. In the episode Pixelator, when Pixelator finds himself in a frantic search for Jagged Stone, it's a clear and hilarious reference to the Terminator. Here, this killing machine shows us that after everything, it still has manners. Instead of just breaking the door down, like I would if I was a military-designed robot, he delicately knocks and waits. This is a shot-by-shot recreation of the Terminator scene in which Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to Sarah Connor's house looking for her. Schwarzenegger wasn't kidding when he said, "I'll be back," because here he is being referenced in a cartoon 30 years later. Number 5, our favorite angels. Juleka is always known for not making it into photos or being straight cut out of them. No one ever sees her. In the episode Reflecta, Hawkmoth transforms Juleka into Reflecta, which gives her the power to turn everyone into exact copies of herself. In the end, to help Juleka get herself noticed, Marinette and the rest of the class do a photo shoot to help remedy the situation. One shot is of Juleka sitting in the middle while Adrian, Nino, and Kim pose around her exactly like Charlie's Angels. In case you didn't know, Charlie's Angels was originally a hit TV series created in the 70s and was rebooted as a movie in 2000 with the sequel in 2003. And it's apparently still influencing our cartoons over 40 years after its debut. Good morning, Angels! Number 6, famous dance moves. In Mr. Pigeon, Cat Noir uses a night guard hat to become bait and catch the evil Akuma. But just as anybody that's ever been bait can confirm, it's incredibly boring. So while he waits for the famed evil villain to show up, he starts dancing. Of course, we know that Cat Noir is a worldly young man that knows both classic and contemporary music, so we can see him masterfully dancing to both Gangnam Style and recreating Michael Jackson's Moonwalk. But the real question is, can he nay-nay? Number 7, anime, video games, and Bruce Lee. There are many references in the episode Kung Fu. The first one comes straight from the appearance of Kung Fu himself, which is clearly based on Dragon Ball Z's Super Saiyan. He even has a King Monkey mask, which is also a reference to our dear Goku. For you video game buffs, you can see that his sword bears a spectacular resemblance to Cloud's Buster Sword in Final Fantasy VII. And finally, the people that have been under Kung Fu's spell, as well as Ladybug and Cat Noir, incorporate Bruce Lee-like moves when they fight. Yeah! Reference overload! We want more! Number 8, more video games! In the episode Gamer, Thomas S. Struck, the series creator, shows off his vast knowledge of video games and robots. We can see many recognizable characters from the Ultimate Mecha Strike 3 game. One person is super similar to R2-D2 and is called, quite imaginatively, R2-D3. Another person looks like Bender from Futurama and is called WI2NY. And they even reference one of our favorite animated films, The Iron Giant, with iron. After rescuing Marinette from the gamer's attack, Cat Noir goes back to combat, screaming, "Do a barrel roll!" Exactly like Peppy Hair commands in Star Fox 64. Go ahead, try it. It's awesome. We'll wait here. The fight with the gamer is a parody of anime mecha battles, and in the heat of the battle, they use the word Katoken to launch their attacks. This word sounds very similar, of course, to Hadouken, which is famously used by Ryu and Ken in Street Fighter. What, no Sonic Boom? No? Next time. Number 9, Hercules, St. George, and Wonder Woman walk into a cave. One of the most popular episodes in the series is Origins Part 1. In the introduction, we can see many cave paintings, but we also see a vase that shows a clear representation of Hercules fighting some kind of Medusa or Sphinx. In addition, we see a stained glass with the depiction of St. George of Cappadocia. He's wearing the incredible colors of Ladybug and fighting a dragon. Spoiler alert, St. George beats the dragon. Another reference is a Japanese painting that resembles a Tengu fighting a yokai. Finally, when Marinette and Alia speak for the first time, Alia shows in her phone a superhero named Majestia, who is a clear reference to Wonder Woman mixed with a little bit of Power Girl. Speaking of Power Girl. Number 10, Tara Strong shoutouts. Alright, well this one's more of an Easter egg, but we had to mention it. In the episode Simon Says, we finally learn a little more about Adrian's mother. There's a whole mystery around where she is and why her disappearance affects Adrian and his father's relationship. While Ladybug is waiting for Adrian in his room, she catches a glance at Adrian's laptop background. Adrian comes in saying it's a picture of his mother from her 17th birthday. The picture is actually an animated version of the voice actress Tara Strong, who's known for playing Bubbles in the original Powerpuff Girls, Timmy on The Fairly Odd Parents, among many, many others. Tara surprisingly does not voice anybody in Miraculous Ladybug. Maybe if Mrs. Agrest appears in an episode, she'll play her. Number 11, Sailor Moon trope. This is also more of a pop culture shout out, but it's too good to not cover. Whether it was intended or not, the show mirrors an old classic in its story devices. The one tidbit of Miraculous Ladybug that enrages the fans is based on how Ladybug and Cat Noir don't recognize each other. If Marinette is so in love with Adrian, how come she doesn't realize he's Cat Noir? Even all of Adrian and Marinette's closest friends can tell. But this odd secret identity trope was used in another classic superhero transformation show, Sailor Moon. Serena looks exactly like Sailor Moon, and Darien looks oddly similar to Tuxedo Mask, yet the two had no idea they were them until it was revealed. Goes to show, sometimes love really is blinding. Hey, once again, I'm Brendan, and thanks for watching 11 pop culture references in Miraculous Ladybug. Are there any references we didn't mention? Comment below and let us know. Click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have videos dropping every day, so make sure to subscribe, because remember, Frederator loves you.
From the center of the revival period, known as the Disney Renaissance, came Disney's Pocahontas, the 23rd animated film produced by Walt Disney Pictures in 1995. Pocahontas is the story of forbidden love, peace, and unity between cultures, and John Smith's sacrificial gesture to save the Powhatan people from the English. Only, it's not. None of that actually happened. These two historical figures did not fall in love. There was no Grandmother Willow, Miko, or Flint, unfortunately. In reality, history is no fairy tale, and the truth behind Pocahontas is one of betrayal, darkness, and death. Once you know the real story, it's no secret why Disney chose to make up the happy-go-lucky myth and not follow the actual historical accounts recorded by John Smith, the English, and the Powhatan people. In reality, there was a lot less trust, a lot more bloodshed, and a love story that doesn't result in a happy ending. But it's merely the beginning of a long and perilous journey for the adventurer known as John Smith. These are some of Disney's dark secrets. Hi, I'm Frank Lucena Frederator, and today we'll be reviewing the real story of Pocahontas and what one brave woman went through in an effort to help shape early America for the better. John Smith, 17th century action hero. By age 21, John Smith was already a legend. As the Disney film had implied, John lived a full life even before his epic journey to the New World. But they didn't give us any details as to why he was impressive. At the young age of 16, the real-life John joined in England's efforts for Dutch independence against the Spanish. And several years later, he fought alongside the Holy Roman Empire in a war against the Turks. After many successful battles, he earned the rank of captain in their army. But shortly afterwards, John was captured by the Ottoman Empire. empire and sold into slavery, where he would eventually meet his true love interest. And spoiler alert, it's not Pocahontas. As the story goes, John was bought by a Turkish nobleman who thought the funny-looking Englishman would make an excellent gift for his mistress, the beautiful Teresa Tropixandra. Apparently he did, because the two quickly fell in love and planned to get married. Still, the mistress feared their affair would be discovered, so he sent John to live with her brother along the Black Sea. Her brother, a different Turkish nobleman, was supposed to educate John in their language and customs, but he had something else in mind: hard labor. John worked the summer of 1602 as a slave harvesting wheat in the hot Turkish fields. John was beaten down mercilessly every day by his supposed brother-in-law until one day he escaped by, beating the guy to death. He made his way east through modern-day Russia as a fugitive. Once John arrived in England, he contacted his commanders in the Holy Roman Army to let him know he was still alive, to which he was awarded with great honor and riches. Eventually, word got out that John was one bad mother, and so a few years later in 1606, John was recruited for a spot on the ship the Susan Constant with the Virginia Trading Company on an exciting new expedition. Can you guess which one? Radcliffe and the Virginia Trading Company. So it's true, some people looked at John as a hero, but not everybody. It wasn't quite like in the film, where the entire musical number burst out once it discovered John Smith was joining the crew. According to many of John's companions, the man was a little full of himself and even abrasive at times. So naturally, John made an enemy almost immediately. The aristocrat portrayed as Governor Radcliffe in the film. His real name was Sir Edward Wingfield, and he's portrayed as a snobby aristocrat in the historical accounts, just as he was in the Disney animation, although Disney did make his character a little more one-dimensional in regards to his motivations. While it's clear that the English were making this journey in hopes of finding gold, that wasn't their number one priority. They really wanted a quick and safe passage west toward the Pacific Ocean. After all, they were a trading company, and if there was a way to hit China and India without sailing around Africa, the company stood to get very rich. Unfortunately for them, we all know how that turned out. Sorry guys, the Pacific Ocean is just a little farther west than Virginia. Journey to the New World. So as seen in the animated film, the trip started off on a terrible note. The weather turned against their favor just 20 miles off the coast of England, but not in the form of a deadly storm as Disney depicted. The real issue was the ship didn't have oars. They were completely reliant on wind, and there was none, so they just sat there waiting for weeks. This whole fiasco started the initial feud between John and Wingfield. Crew could literally see their homes on the horizon, so many of them just wanted to go home. However, the more experienced seafarers knew that if they docked the ship, it would be months before the crew could regroup again. Wingfield was among those who wanted to go home, and of course, John argued against it. Wingfield was a big investor in the expedition and wasn't used to the word no, so a grudge formed rather quickly. The boat captain decided they would stay in the boat and wait it out. Of course, none of this was shown on the film, but it explains why Disney chose Wingfield to be the antagonist that ultimately butts heads with John. At their stop in the Canary Islands, history reports that an argument broke out between the two, and Wingfield had John imprisoned over accusations of treason and alleged mutiny. I guess Disney forgot to mention that John spent the majority of his journey to the New World behind bars. Unfortunately for him, the crew left the islands only to lose themselves for 10 days in the Caribbean. They almost gave up on the mission entirely and headed back to England. The Jamestown Settlement. Needless to say, the English eventually arrived in Virginia, and although there wasn't much focus on Jamestown in the film, the Susan Consent crew were under very specific orders from the Virginia Company, like to find unoccupied land and set up shop, which they did, on the peninsula within the Chesapeake Bay area. That seemed good for defensive purposes, but not much else. They named the settlement Jamestown, and the river next to it James River, after their current king, King James. The Virginia Company had predetermined who would be the members of the settlement's leading council, and set the names along in a box that was to be opened once the colonists had settled. To no surprise, Wingfield was on the council, but somehow John Smith was too. However, at the time, he was still imprisoned on the ship and scheduled for an execution that would never happen, and so the other councilman kept his power secret. A few days later, Wingfield was elected president, and they set John free. Wingfield informed John of his position on the council right before declaring he'd be removed from it. Yeah, Wingfield was a real piece of work. Much to John's surprise, no defense tactics had been set in order for Jamestown. There was no fort for protection, only a short stick fence as seen in the Disney film. But Disney forgot to mention the men had left all the big artillery on the ship, including muskets. The entire settlement was completely unprepared for any sort of enemy attack. So guess what happened next? the natives and the English. A huge inaccuracy in Disney's Pocahontas is the implication that the natives immediately rejected the English. Sure, the natives had a few bad encounters with the Spanish beforehand, and yeah, they weren't exactly stoked over invaders squatting on their land, but they made efforts to be cordial. Not to mention, the English were under direct orders to form an alliance with the natives for survival purposes. There was no kill the savages mindset in place among their arrival, as the Disney version shows or sings. In fact, Wingfield did everything in his power to keep from offending the natives, and for a while it worked, until one day it didn't. Unbeknownst to them, Jamestown was settled on territory that belonged to the Paspahegh tribe, a tribe in the Chesapeake Bay region that was one of many overseen by Chief Powhatan of the Powhatan people. The chief of the Paspahegh arrived in Jamestown to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Hey, what's up?" But the English refused to put down their pistols. As you can imagine, that was seen as a truly offensive gesture to the chief, and so a feud commenced, starting with a really big surprise attack just a few days later. The English were outnumbered 2-1, and they would have been wiped out completely if it weren't for the ship's cannon scaring off the tribe. So naturally, once the natives left, the English started building their defenses and unloading artillery as quickly as possible. Untold trades and bloodshed. Eventually, friendly tribesmen did visit the English in an effort to form alliances, and the paramount chief of the land hauled off the Paspahegh feud temporarily. It sounds good and all, but trading had ceased with the natives at this time, and so without corn, Jamestown was starving. Then, disease broke out. James River was the only source of water for the colonists, and they had not yet familiarized themselves with the inconsistent currents. They were unaware that their drinking water had been mixed with seawater and their own waste. Ugh, not a great combo. 2/3 of the colonists died in Jamestown, and so the Virginia Company had been pressing John to search for a passage to the Pacific before it was too late. This is where history really differs from the fairy tale, because while John wandered through the woods, he made many trades for food along the way. According to his written accounts, he made trades of corn for trinkets with the locals, who were dazzled by the offer. But according to the Powhatan people, these trades were made at gunpoint. No one really knows for sure, but John was depicted as trigger-happy in both historical accounts and the Disney film. Remember when John meets Pocahontas in the film? It's with his gun drawn and ready, although he quickly lowers his weapon once he realizes his target is a gorgeous woman. Still, that aspect seemed to be a fairly accurate portrayal of John, and it was during this time that he made a bad reputation for himself among the Powhatan people, which resulted in a major ambush, a few dead Englishmen, and the capturing of John Smith. The Powhatan people. Disney's Pocahontas condensed the tribes in that region down to one, the aforementioned Powhatan people. That's because they were a ruling force in the area, controlling over 30 different tribes. Plus, it's just easier to remember one name in lieu of 30, I guess. As in the film, the paramount chief of those tribes was Chief Powhatan. After John was captured, the chief decided to question him on why he decided to migrate so far from Jamestown. History dictates that after the introduction, an alliance was formed between John Smith and the Powhatan chief. The natives would offer their land and resources to the English. In return, the English would help serve their community. In a sense, this meant the colonists would be looked upon as their own tribe in affiliation with the Powhatan people, and John would be appointed chief. In celebration, a feast took place, and the events that transpired shortly after would translate into one of the most iconic scenes in the 1995 film, Pocahontas and John Smith. Historians debate whether or not his part of the story actually happened, but John claimed that during his welcoming ceremony, the Powhatan chief had planned to betray him. Powhatan tried to club John in the back of the head. Upon his attempt, Pocahontas had intervened by throwing herself upon John. Sound familiar? Yeah, that scene's in the Disney movie, though this was historically said to be the first time John meets Pocahontas. It served as a climax for the film. Now, there are numerous differences between the real Pocahontas and Disney's Pocahontas, the biggest one being her age. Pocahontas was only 11 years old when she met John Smith. I know what you're thinking, but the love affair between Pocahontas and John Smith was completely fabricated. The two were just friends, and as previously stated, John's true love was the mistress he was enslaved to in Istanbul. Historian Camilla Townsend believes that John and Pocahontas taught each other the basics of their languages, and it is said that Pocahontas served as an ambassador for her people since she could translate. Also, Pocahontas wasn't actually a princess, even though she's now considered one in the eyes of Disney. The Powhatan system of power was complicated. It allowed chiefs to have several families and several wives, and Pocahontas was one of many children that would likely never come to see real power, but would still be treated as royalty, so to speak. There was no arranged marriage either, as seen in the Disney film. Powhatan power was passed down through descendants on the woman's side, so marriage wasn't a pressing matter unless it was for peace between tribes. She did eventually marry a warrior from the tribe, much like the one in the film, but on her own terms. Oh, and did I mention her name wasn't even Pocahontas? That was the nickname given to her by her father, which meant Little Mischievous One. Her real name was Matoka, which translates to fire between streams, and considering her fate is a little on the nose. Still, the Powhatan people believe a person's real name grants power over them, hence Pocahontas. The True Alliance. Since the actual events were condensed for the sake of the film, there were a lot of details removed, including the original alliance between the colonists and the natives. The alliance was strong for about a year. John had since been elected president, while Wingfield had returned to England under accusations of hoarding food. He didn't stick around for the whole story like in the film, and it had been sweet revenge for John. So for a while there, things were looking up for the colonists, and it was said that Powhatan considered John to be an adopted son, and Pocahontas had become somewhat of a little sister to John. She'd often visit him, and he'd gift her with tons of beautiful jewelry. In the name of their relationship, Pocahontas had pledged her life on peace between the natives and the English. Unfortunately, the alliance between the English and the Powhatan came to an end, and historians aren't exactly sure what went down. Powhatan oral history suggests that John lied about his promises and simply leeched off the natives, often robbing them of their corn in exchange for useless trinkets during the time of famine. The English accounts say that the natives retreated upon their agreement and started hoarding resources and food during the drought, in an effort to protect themselves and starve out the English. One detail remains true on both accounts. Everyone was starving and desperate, so tensions heightened and John confronted Chief Powhatan. Upon confrontation, the chief ordered that John prove his alliance the next day by not bringing any weapons to their village as a gesture of trust, and the two would reconcile their differences. It was during their encounter the following day where something went horribly wrong, and shots were fired from both sides. Suddenly, the alliance was broken. John vowed that he and his people would board their ship and leave, but unfortunately, it was low tide, and the Englishmen were forced to stay in the Powhatan village for the night. It was awkward to say the least. John's hidden ending. John Smith wrote that Pocahontas woke him up during the night that the alliance had been broken. She warned him that her father strengthened his defenses while they were sleeping and was planning an attack. The tide was high, so she urged him and his men to leave immediately, which is another part of history that is highly debated, but it was mentioned in John's official records published in 1924, though that was about 300 years after everything happened. Of course, the Powhatan begged to differ, but no one really knows the truth. What we do know is that the English fled back to Jamestown during the night. History claims on both accounts that during the remaining time in Virginia, John Smith threatened and raided his way downriver, burning Powhatan villages to the ground and taking what food he could find. You could say that this was a tiny bit different from the portrayal of John Smith in Disney's Pocahontas, but it's not hard to see why those changes were made for the sake of the family film. The raids resulted in the Powhatan abandoning their capital village and relocating toward the edge of their domain. The last the Powhatan had seen of John, he attempted to wage war against their new capital, but failed miserably. The next time Powhatan and Pocahontas would hear from John Smith, it would be of his death. There was an accident involving misfire and a gunshot wound to the leg. In the film, John takes a bullet to save Powhatan's life. It was said he died in real life where the film ended, on his voyage back to England to receive medical treatment. Worlds collide, the unseen aftermath. By the time Pocahontas was 18, the age she was depicted in the film, she had been taken by the English and held up in Jamestown. It was there that she learned to speak English and met her second husband, an Englishman by the name of John Rolfe, the man responsible for commercializing tobacco. Once the two were married, Pocahontas converted to Christianity and was granted her freedom under the name Rebecca Rolfe. The two even had a son which they named Thomas Rolfe. Then, in 1616, the Virginia Company paid to have the Rolfe family brought to London so they could parade them around as progress for investors in Jamestown. On her last day in London, she was told an old friend had come to visit. To her surprise, it was John Smith. Despite the rumors, John survived his trip back to England and even returned to North America, where he founded New England. During his stay in America, he also discovered a cape, which he named after his one true love, Cape Trapexandra, the mistress in Istanbul. It was later renamed by King Charles as Cape Anne, and it remains there to this day, just 30 miles north of Boston, Massachusetts. Many historians speculate that the reunion didn't go well. John's own accounts seem to trail off after she finally agreed to talk to him, and that's after she ignored him for several hours. The next day, Rebecca Rolfe and her family boarded a ship, ready to set sail back to Virginia, but Rebecca fell ill only a few miles out to sea. The ship docked at the town of Gravesend, where Rebecca Rolfe died from what they believe was dysentery. Some people say she died of smallpox, but most hold that as untrue. John Rolfe said his wife's last words were, "All must die. It's enough my child lives." Of course, in the Disney version, we see her still alive in the end. John Rolfe died just 3 years later, and their son, Thomas Rolfe, inherited his father's land in Virginia. It was said that Thomas Rolfe was accepted by both the English and the Powhatan people during the war, and in a way represented unity between cultures. In the end, Pocahontas bridged a gap between two very different worlds. And while Disney's Pocahontas is far more romanticized, it certainly pays homage to a truly remarkable woman, one willing to sacrifice herself in the name of peace. There you have it. I'm Frank with Channel Frederator, and thank you for watching Disney's Dark Secrets and the True true history behind Pocahontas. Please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and tell us what dark tale we should cover next. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have videos dropping every day, so make sure and subscribe to Channel Frederator.
In some ways, the 90s were a cultural zenith for animation. All the major networks had strong lineups, and the emergence of animated content geared toward older audiences forced everyone to step up the quality. The 90s introduced classics like Rugrats, Animaniacs, Beavis and Butthead, Batman the Animated Series, South Park, Family Guy, and SpongeBob, just to name a few. Yet there are some shows and characters that fell through the cracks of the 2000s. But here at Channel Frederator, we are dedicated to making sure all cartoons are heard. I'm Joe, and today we're going on a nostalgic trip to revisit 10 characters only 90s kids would know. Number 10. Freakazoid. In the world of crime-fighting vigilantes, there are the silent, broody types. And then there are the absolute maniacs. Freakazoid, the star of the cartoon series of the same name, is very much a case of the latter. The alter ego of computer nerd Dexter Douglas, Freakazoid got his abilities from a freak computer accident, pun intended, which left him with great power and a very deranged mind. Freakazoid served as a manic mockery of the superhero genre, while still offering the audience an engaging comic story. The show's success is not a surprise when you consider that the show was created by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, who were also responsible for Batman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited. With outrageous villains and an even more outrageous hero, Freakazoid was one of those shows that's something of a cult classic, but remains unknown by many who weren't around during the right place at the right time. In an era where every other superhero is getting their renaissance, why not have one for the only hero who ever openly admitted to fighting evil in his underwear? Number 9. Eek the Cat. It never hurts to help. That is, of course, unless you're Eek the Cat. Then offering assistance tends to hurt a whole lot. A Canadian series that aired on Fox Kids from 1992 to 1997, Eek the Cat told the story of a feline whose penchant for selflessness often got him into loads of trouble, because nothing's funnier than watching a cute cat get into mishaps, right kids? Eek's unfortunate adventures often took the shape of pop culture parodies, genre spoofs, and in some cases, even musical scenarios. The great joy of Eek was that his never-ending optimism kept him forging ahead, despite the maladies he encountered each week. You couldn't help but root for the little purple furball, even if you knew it wasn't going to always go his way. Plus, Eek's main nemesis was Sharky, a dog who was also half shark. Tell me that isn't cool. Although relatively undiscussed today, Eek was one of the great joys of the 90s Saturday morning programming, and his show is ripe for rediscovery. Number 8. Bobby Generic. Long before comedian Howie Mandel was known for his savvy game show hosting skills or his harsh critiques as a judge on America's Got Talent, he was the man behind one of the 90s most beloved cartoons, Bobby's World. As surreal as placing that name within the realm of animation seems now, Bobby's World was actually quite popular and aired on Fox Kids from 1990 to 1998. Based on a character voice Howie used in his stand-up routines, Bobby's World centered around the life of Bobby Generic, a small boy with an extremely overactive imagination. Bobby's misunderstandings and literal interpretations of things that he hears adults say often gets him into some brand of hijinks. In addition to Mandel, the show also employed the voice talents of many other comedians, including former SNL cast member Gail Mathias as Bobby's mom, who flourished in that Minnesotan accent before Fargo even existed. Thanks to the show's cozy and colloquial nature, it garnered a big fan base during its run. In a 2014 interview at San Diego Comic-Con, Mandel suggested that there was a chance that Bobby and his tricycle may one day ride again. Until then, fans of the show will have to make like Bobby himself and just keep imagining. Number 7. Sea-Bear. If you have fond memories of a streetwise teddy bear with a velvety voice, there's more than a passing chance that you're thinking of the lead character of Sea-Bear and Jamal. The show only aired on Fox Kids for 1 year in 1996 and chronicled the adventures of a perpetually in trouble 9-year-old and the ultra-smooth teddy bear who had his back. Sea-Bear and Jamal taught kids about the importance of teamwork and believing in yourself, as a good kids show tends to do. But rather than be didactic in its approach, the show went to great lengths to be extra cool in executing its lessons. Did I mention that Sea-Bear was voiced by popular late 80s, early 90s rap icon Tone Loc? You know, the guy behind the 80s hit song Wild Thing? If you're wondering whether that means whether the show had more than its fair share of amazing hip-hop musical moments, let me tell you, it most certainly did. You wish your childhood teddy was this looks cool. Number 6, Powdered Toast Man. If you can't hear those 3 words without an echoey voice in your head going, Powdered Toast Man, then congratulations, you are a child of the 90s. While Ren and Stimpy themselves have certainly remained infamous, their show was frequently host to a very colorful cast of not quite infamous side characters, including Muddy Mud Skipper, the Horse, and Log, if we can count a product as a character. But perhaps none of these characters were as quintessentially Ren and Stimpy as Powdered Toast Man, a hero whose flatulence both enabled him to fly and made the toast he just produced by shaving off his head and scraping it absolutely delicious. Powdered Toast Man is a pastor by day, naturally, but also does some conventionally hero-type things, like fly backwards and help the president get his you-know-what out of a zipper. However, Powdered Toast Man's real legacy is that he served as a vehicle to get music legend Frank Zappa to star on the show as a tiny pope. And as a 90s kid, admit it, there were totally times you were in trouble and wanted Powdered Toast Man to come through your window and cry, "Leave everything to me." Number 5, Stick Stickly. He wasn't technically in a show, and he wasn't even technically a cartoon. But if you watched cartoons in the 90s, you definitely encountered him. Coming across Stick Stickly almost 20 years after his debut is like getting slapped in the face with a long-forgotten friend from your childhood. Stick Stickly hosted Nick in the Afternoon, a summer programming block from 1995 to 1998. For 3 summers, instead of playing outside like good children, Stick Stickly coaxed us to stay indoors and guided us through the wonderful world of Nicktoons. How else would we know what was about to come on next? Who else would listen to our requests of what show we wanted to play? Or what P.O. box to use when writing unintelligible letters to Nick? He even had his own half-hour special, Oh Brother, which may have slipped by you even back in the day. He also enjoyed a brief nostalgic resurgence in 2011 for the 90s Is All That block. Let us take this opportunity to officially thank Stick Stickly for guiding us through our childhood, even through his multiple anxiety attacks. Number 4, Kit Cloudkicker. Remember Tailspin? That cartoon where Baloo from the Jungle Book was a pilot and Shere Khan wore a suit? Tailspin was only around between 1990 and 91, so if you were still teetering on the brink of human consciousness, you probably missed it. The Disney cartoons of the late 80s and early 90s had the rather bizarre tendency to take tried and true characters, plop them into surprising scenarios, and surround them with a solid supporting cast that we never heard from again. But 12-year-old Brown Bear, Kit Cloudkicker, also known as Cool Preteen Corduroy, was a little different from the others. Not only did he have an objectively awesome name, but he broke out of the Disney fold by actually having a pretty dark backstory. You see, Kit here was a member of Don Carnage's Air Pilots, the series antagonists, until he got sick of it, got out of there, and teamed up with our beloved Baloo. No wonder he's had to put on a tough guy exterior and is a little hesitant to trust adults. Understandable, everything considered. Seriously, you wonder what this kid went through, and even just wondering about that makes him one of the most underrated 90s Disney sidekicks. Number 3, Big Dog and Little Dog. Even though you may not know why, the image of a big gray dog with no eyes and a shrill-sounding wiener-type dog may look familiar. Those canines are courtesy of Two Stupid Dogs, a Hanna-Barbera cartoon that debuted in 1993 on TBS. Two Stupid Dogs detailed the adventures of Big Dog and Little Dog, who were, as the title suggests, not all that bright. The show's strength relied heavily on a tried-and-true comedy duo format. Little Dog is loud, brash, and hyperactive, while Big Dog is the silent, observant type. To add to that surreal post-90s reflection, Little Dog and Big Dog were voiced by Mark Schiff and Brad Garrett, respectively. That's right, the Everybody Loves Raymond guy. Together, the dogs' mismatched personas were a recipe for hilarity. Don't just take our word for it. This show was nominated for an Emmy. Besides, the show appealed to the sensibilities and aesthetics of Hanna-Barbera's more successful series of the 50s and 60s, but added a healthy 90s edge. Did we mention this show was super weird? Like, Big Dog lets baby chicks live in his ribcage, and then Little Dog exposes his skeleton from the inside out weird. Yeah, so that's a thing. Number 2, Jay Sherman. Following the success of The Simpsons, networks were eager to find another adult-oriented primetime animated series. One such example came in 1994 with the debut of The Critic, because who better to follow up on The Simpsons than Simpsons executive producers Al Jean and Mike Reiss. The Critic centered around Jay Prescott Sherman, a New York City film critic who happened to dislike most of the movies he watched. Jay Sherman was mean-spirited and a snob, but his honesty won many people over, and in the true spirit of the 90s, comedian John Lovitz was given top billing as Sherman's voice actor. Against the spirit of Sherman himself, The Critic was a critical darling. A cornerstone of its success was its elaborate satires of popular films, which Jay Sherman would review on his show within a show. The intelligent mockery of subsequent films like Ace Ventura and The Lion King appealed to fans of intellectual comedy and movie buffs alike. Sadly, the show wasn't renewed after its second season, but remains a cult favorite among die-hard devotees. It stinks! Just kidding. Number 1, Bonkers. Remember our favorite clumsy toon who went from showbiz washout to LA cop? Yeah, Bonkers is a fitting name for this show, and for this hyper-feline character, whose full name is Bonkers D. Bobcat, by the way. The show ran from 1993 to 1994 as part of the Disney afternoon lineup. Inspired by the world of Roger Rabbit, the premise centered around Bonkers and his human detective partner, Lucky Piquel, who hated Bonkers and all toons in general. They worked together to fight crime in Los Angeles, and of course, Bonkers would always mess up their operations. Don't worry though, Bonkers later got a new partner, Miranda Wright, who was much more patient than his last one. Of course, by that time, Piquel grew to really care about Bonkers. Aw, so did we. Maybe that's why the show later aired reruns, the last ones being on Toon Disney in 2004. And in case you didn't know, the voice of both Bonkers and Lucky Piquel was done by Jim Cummings, who's also provided the voices for Darkwing Duck, Winnie the Pooh, Tigger the Tasmanian Devil, Pete of Mickey Mouse fame, and Dr. Robotnik from the Sonic the Hedgehog animated series, just to name a few. So even though Bonkers is gone, his voice still lives on in a bunch of our other favorite shows. Guess he's not so washed up after all. There you have it. Of course, there were a lot of cartoons on air in the 90s. Do you have a favorite that we didn't mention today? Let us know in the comments below. Click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. We have videos dropping every day, so make sure to subscribe, because remember, Frederator loves you.
Megatron, the Joker, Skeletor, SpongeBob SquarePants? If you don't think everyone's favorite animated sea sponge belongs in this rogues gallery of some of the most depraved cartoon villains, then you're only half wrong. While he may not be a villain in the traditional sense of the word, SpongeBob's committed his fair share of serious crimes. Hi, I'm ValeSkibum94 with Channel Frederator. Forget everything you thought you knew about SpongeBob, because today we're talking about 10 things he's done that would get him arrested in no time in the real world. Let's get arrested, started. Number 10. Breaking and entering. After making a new friend, you or I might try to go see a movie together or invite them over to play video games. In SpongeBob's case, not long after meeting Sandy Cheeks a mere season earlier, he breaks into her home uninvited. Harmless? Maybe. A serious crime? Absolutely. The break-in occurs in the episode Survival of the Idiots when SpongeBob and Patrick enter Sandy's front door in spite of a keep out sign attached to it and a video in her entryway explaining that she's hibernating, forbidding anyone, especially SpongeBob, from going inside. While hesitant at first, as soon as Patrick opens the door to the snowy interior of Sandy's tree dome, SpongeBob can't help himself and enters. This is both a crime in our world and a pretty rude thing to do to a friend. In the grand scheme of things, breaking and entering is a minor offense compared to some of SpongeBob's more serious crimes. And believe me, he's committed some serious crimes. Since he didn't steal anything from Sandy's home, this would just be considered a misdemeanor and SpongeBob would face a jail sentence of less than a year. Number 9. Grand Theft Auto. While Grand Theft Auto spawned one of the most successful video game series of all time, it's still totally a crime, and one of which SpongeBob SquarePants himself is guilty. As if impersonating a lifeguard isn't irresponsible enough, as soon as SpongeBob needs to put the pedal to the metal, pun intended, and save Patrick from drowning, he quickly resorts to stealing a vehicle right out from under its owner's noses. This happens in the season 3 episode Sponge Guard on Duty when SpongeBob gets jealous of Larry the Lobster's lifeguarding job at Goo Lagoon and attempts to do the job himself after being mistaken by Larry as a fellow lifeguard. Patrick's butt starts to cramp. Hey, it could happen, and SpongeBob, being the lifeguard on duty, has to save him from drowning. Very ironically, given that the dude lives underwater, SpongeBob can't swim, so he gets out onto the lagoon by stealing a vehicle from a young couple innocently enjoying a hot dog in the parking lot. Party foul, dude, and also criminal. Grand Theft Auto can be either a misdemeanor or a felony depending on the circumstances of the crime and the defendant's criminal record. Minimum, SpongeBob would be looking at up to a year in prison for a misdemeanor or up to 3 years for a felony, which is still, believe it or not, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to SpongeBob's crime-filled life. Number 8. Invasion of privacy. Like many new, powerful forms of technology, drones can both accomplish new and exciting things that were never before possible, like film really cool nature videos or be used for some more nefarious purposes. Given his criminal proclivities, it's no surprise that, in the recent episode Whirly Brains, SpongeBob gets a drone that, for some weird reason, is also his own brain, and very quickly uses it for a criminal act, spying on a neighbor in the safety of his own bath. Yep, Peeping Bob. But back to the weird brain drone thing. In this episode, turning your brain into a drone is the coolest new toy on the market, so of course SpongeBob and Patrick want to try it out for themselves. As soon as they get them, one of the very first things they use them to do is fly into Squidward's home and spy on him during his bath time. While Squidward may be their friend of sorts, or so they believe, this is still a serious invasion of privacy. In California, where SpongeBob SquarePants is made, this actually falls under a specific set of laws called the Peeping Tom laws, which prohibit taking photos or videos of someone in an area where they expect privacy. In this case, while it's not a
Hello everyone, this is Mumbo and welcome back to another episode on the Hermitcraft server. That was not my most glamorous entrance into the Hermitcraft episode right there, but what I wanted to say was that the base is looking awesome. I have not actually played on the server for probably the past 4 days, which is ridiculous, okay? I never spend that much time away, but unfortunately, while I was away in Cornwall, I was doing some surfing, I was away in the camper van, which was absolutely fantastic. But then yesterday, I had the most killer day. And when I say killer, I mean bad. I spoke about this on Twitter and at the beginning of the previous episode of Hermitcraft. It's the reason the Hermitcraft episode was late. Basically, I was a total spoon. And I left my keys, all of my keys in Vicky's car in the morning. She went off to work. She works from like 7 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. And I was like, oh, that's really frustrating because I just needed to upload that Hermitcraft episode. Then it would be good to go. So I was like, fine, you know what? I'll just wait. I will wait for Vicky to return. She got back and then I was like, okay, I've got my keys. I'm going to quickly go and upload this. Half an hour drive away. Might be able to get it out tonight. The camper van didn't start. It had run out of battery. I had left the light on the inside of the camper van, which meant that it wouldn't start. And I am gradually adding spoon moments here because I'm a total moron. Just yesterday was one of those days that nothing went right. Nothing went right in the slightest, so hopefully this one's a little bit better. But anyway, aside from that, plan number 1 for today's Hermitcraft episode is to create a super ridiculous squid farm going all the way around the outside of my base that will pick up all of the ink sacs that are dropped by all of the constantly suiciding squids that seem to just be dropping in everywhere. Hopefully it should be quite